acknowledgement. The Suzanne Dworak-Peck School of Social Work at the University of Southern California acknowledge our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. We recognize that these people were forcefully removed from their homelands. We take this opportunity to acknowledge the generations that have gone before us, as well as the present-day Gabrielino Tongva people. With humility, we recognize and respect all Indigenous people of their histories and ties to the land. We also recognize the Chumash, Tatavinam, Serrano, Chuhila, Juanio, and Lucenio peoples for the land that the USC occupies around Southern California. We pay respects to their past and present. Let this acknowledgement serve as an ongoing reminder for the original inhabitants where you reside. My name is Devishka Shavers, and I'm the president of USC Phi Alpha Honor Society. Again, I would like to welcome everyone to this event. It would not have been possible without you. And now I would like to introduce you to a few of our board members, starting with our Vice President, Crystal Davis.
So as she mentioned, I am the Vice President of Phi Alpha Honor Society. My name is Crystal Davis, and I will be co-facilitating this morning.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lauren, and I am the Secretary of the USC Phi Alpha Honor Society, and I will also be co-facilitating this morning.
Good morning, greeting to all. My name is Su-Chen Shao, Faculty Advisor for USC Phi Alpha Honor Society African Epsilon chapter since 2011. I have the pleasure and honor to collaborate with our current e-board, as well as many exceptional social work students and graduates. Welcome to our research symposium, and I hope you enjoy all the wonderful presentation. I now turn it over to our research liaison, Sulamita Ortiz.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all again for being here. My name is Sulamita, and I am the research liaison for USC Phi Alpha Honor Society. And for today's symposium, it is sponsored by the USC School of Social Work Admissions Program. And you will be hearing from a variety of professional organizations today that you can participate in order to expand your professional network, but also obtain more resources from them. You will also be hearing from various research topics from social work faculty and graduate students. And in the middle of our symposium, we're estimating about 10:20, we will be having a 15-minute break. And the purpose of our symposium is to bring together various professionals within the field to present, but also engage in scholarly discussions about the research within social work. So with that said, we have our presenter, Ms. Cherie Hudson, who is representing the California Association of School Social Workers today. She will be discussing briefly the association and its benefits. So everyone, please welcome Ms. Cherie Hudson.
Hello, good morning. My name is Cherie Hudson. My pronouns are she, her. I'm so honored to be here representing the California Association of School Social Workers, CASSW. A quick bit about myself. I am a licensed clinical social worker in Long Beach, California. It's where I have a private practice offering therapy, consultation, and supervision. I also am working adjunct part-time with the USC Suzanne Dworak-Peck School of Social Work, which I've been doing since 2016. And before that, I was a school social worker with the Los Angeles Unified School District for 10 years. So I actually became a member of the California Association of School Social Workers, CASSW, when I was an MSW grad student. I knew that I wanted to go into social work, and I was told that it was a good way to start networking. So I became a member, remained a member, and eventually was selected to serve on the board as the Los Angeles Orange County Regional Coordinator. I held that position for several years, and currently I am the treasurer for CASSW. This is my last term. So enough about me. I would definitely like to just share a few words about the California Association of School Social Workers. So CASSW was established to promote the professional growth of school social work in schools and to influence the California school system to maintain and increase responsiveness to the social, emotional, educational, and mental health needs of all students. We currently have just under 550 members, most of whom are school social workers. However, we also have many members who are college students, as well as school counselors, teachers, and administrators. We have a few highlights from this past year that I'm really proud of, things that the organization has been talking about for a long time, and we finally got off the ground. So I'd like to share those. We started by surveying our membership last summer, and overwhelmingly the feedback that we received from members was that they wanted more support and professional development opportunities, more learning. So as a result, we launched several projects. First, we developed a new school social work institute that has been offering monthly professional development and community practice space for folks who are 0 to 3 years into the profession. And that's been ongoing since October. We also began providing monthly workshops that are free for members and also offer free continuing education units for folks who need them. Some of the topics we've covered there have been burnout, community care, building student support teams and intern programs. And this Thursday, March 30th, a peer mentoring program session will be held. Another significant highlight for us is the monthly affinity group that we began hosting called Healing Waters. It's specifically for school social work students who identify as Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Equally exciting, for the first time ever, we offered mini grants to school social workers. So we had an application process that was open to membership, and we had the honor of awarding $3,000 among 6 of our CASSW members. And finally, another highlight is we held our annual conference in February, just last month. It was a 2-day virtual event. However, we are already planning our next conference, and it will be in person, which we are very much looking forward to. So there are many benefits to becoming a member of CASSW, including all of the opportunities I just mentioned, which we are definitely planning to continue providing and hosting and facilitating. But also you would get access to our newsletter, our listserv and website, all of which have numerous resources, networking and learning opportunities. Lastly, we also engage in a range of advocacy activities, so partnering with the California Department of Education and other advocacy groups to work on focusing and creating and promoting legislation and policy that improves the well-being of the communities that we serve. So the best time to join is when you are a student. Membership costs $10 at that time, and I hope you will consider joining or learning more about us. We definitely invite any questions or feedback. I know there will be a resource list, I believe, sent out with our president's email address, but I believe also through the website, there's a contact form where you could submit any questions that you have. Again, I'm really honored to be here and share just a little bit about our association. It's been a great honor for me to be a member and to serve on the board. I've developed really incredible relationships and have had the opportunity to engage in a lot of learning and advocacy. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Hudson, for that beautiful overview of the California Association of School Social Workers. As she mentioned, we are going to send out an email with all of the organization's contact information in case anybody has any questions as well. And then for our next professional organization, we have Ms. Maria Wright. She is the representative for the Board of Behavioral Sciences. Everyone, please welcome Ms. Maria.
Thank you, everyone, and good morning. Happy Saturday. I will be here to share a little bit about the Board of Behavioral Sciences. Before I do that, I'll introduce myself. My name is Maria Wright. I am a social worker. I have my bachelor's from San Diego State University, my master's in social work from Cal State East Bay, and my focus has always been in child welfare. And as a child welfare worker, I received my associate clinical social work registrant number from the BBS at the end of 2017 and have been working diligently to become a licensed clinical social worker. And so I'm here to share a little bit about what this agency does and what it offers. I'm going to share first a link into the chat. I want to make sure you have their general website. The Board of Behavioral Sciences is in the state of California regulates is a regulatory agency that looks over and is responsible for the licensing, examination, and enforcement of professional standards. And these standards are for LMFT or AMFTs, associate clinical social workers and LCSWs, as well as licensed professional clinical counselors and associates and licensed educational psychologists. When you think about the mission of the BBS, it's to protect, serve Californians by setting, communicating, and enforcing standards for safe and competent mental health practices. As mental health professionals, it's our responsibility to keep the public safe and doing that within our practice. And so the BBS regulates that and ensures that those that are associates and licensed are not impacting the public in any unhealthy way. Another thing I want to share is the frequently asked questions. If you are interested in becoming a licensed professional through the BBS, oftentimes people have many questions. And so I want to share that with you up front so you can kind of read through those frequently asked questions and think, okay, this is going to help prepare me for that next step if I so want to become licensed and become a professional in the mental health field. It has over 45 questions that have been commonly asked, and I do encourage you to read through that. Oh, okay, share with everyone. Will do. One more time. I'm going to share this in the chat because there was another option. All right, so now you can see this in the chat. If you go ahead and click the link or the PDF that just went into the chat, you can open it up. And it walks you through the coursework that you need to complete prior to your ASW registration. Oftentimes, if you are in a school of social work, quite a few of these courses are already offered and you are already taking them. And so you can line up your social work coursework with the required courses to see what's already been accomplished. I want to share another document. This is the most recent newsletter for the BBS. And if you see, this is the fall newsletter. Their spring newsletter has not come out yet. But I do think it's a great opportunity to read through to see what this board is all about, some of the law changes that they have for 2023, right? Because the laws change each year, and it is good and important to stay up on what laws are current. Usually the laws will impact supervision, licensing, and community safeguarding, right? And so you can go ahead and read through their most recent newsletter. When I think about what the BBS has done and how it has supported me and my colleagues, is it gives a clear outline on the process to licensure, the process for supervision, and the continuing education requirements and support that are needed for us here in the state of California. I'm also a board of director on the California Society for Clinical Social Work, where I am the BBS liaison. And so if you have any questions on this process or want additional support, you're more than welcome to join the California Society for Clinical Social Work. We also have a student rate, and there's a lot of opportunities. I'm also the mentorship program chair. And so if you are interested at all in clinical social work, please do not hesitate to reach out. Lastly, I'm going to drop my info card in the chat. If you'd like to communicate or reach out or seek additional support, I am more than happy to be there and support you. Thank you so much for having me today. This is such an honor to be here and be a part of your morning programming, and thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, but the Board of Behavioral Health Sciences is our regulatory board and is very important and is your initial step to becoming a mental health professional. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maria, for that awesome information that you just gave out. And then moving on, we're going to go to our first presenter of our symposium. And we would like to give a brief introduction. So for our first presenter, we have Dr. John Blosnich. Dr. John Blosnich is an assistant and professional director of the Center for the LGBTQ+ Health Equity in the Suzanne Dworak-Peck School of Social Work at the University of Southern California. His research focuses on health equity for LGBT individuals with specific emphasis on social determinants of health and suicide risk. Dr. Blosnich has earned several research awards from both the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs and National Institutes of Health, and most recently, Dr. Blosnich was a 2021 recipient of an NIH Director's New Innovator Award to support his research into adverse social factors that can be targeted for upstream suicide prevention. So everyone, please welcome Dr. John Blosnich.
Great, thank you so much, Sulamita. Thank you everyone for making the time and welcoming here. I'm very appreciative of the time and space that everyone is making for this. I am going to talk to you briefly today about getting engaged in research during your MSW program and some of the really cool opportunities we have in the School of Social Work that you may or may not be aware of. So hopefully some of this information is new. But a little bit of my background, before I came to USC in 2020, I spent about 10 years or so with the Department of Veterans Affairs. So working in our nation's largest integrated healthcare system. So a lot of my background is in health services research, specific to suicide risk. And I have a lot of experience in research. I teach the 546 class, which is the science of social work. The point of all of this is to hopefully, give you all some idea of some of the research opportunities that are there and get you excited about research in a social work program. So the key thing is, research impacts social work, but social work also impacts research in this. And it doesn't matter what level of social work that you are working in, right? So if you're in private practice, research impacts your private practice. You're often going to wonder, what does the current evidence say about treatment that I'm doing with my client? If you want to change treatment plans, what's the next best alternative treatment that you could use for a client? If you're working in more of a meso area of agencies and organizations, you might come up with program evaluation issues that you might be in charge of, right? So it doesn't matter if you land in education as a school social worker, if you land in a family and human their health services sector, in a hospital setting, research will come up into the duties that you may have in your job as a social worker. And then lastly, at a macro level, with communities, advocacy, and policy, the role of social workers in helping us to figure out how do we translate research into action for communities and to humanize research. A lot of research is, it's human subjects research, and I feel like social workers humanize research. So playing a really pivotal role. And one way that you have an opportunity in this program to get involved is through a 590 class. So that's directed research. And so this really formalizes this experience for you all. It's based on availability, fit, the assignments and the expectations that you can set up with a faculty mentor to get a really specific research experience based on a lot of the projects that are happening across a school, across faculty members. You have to have a 3.0 overall GPA to be eligible for a 590, and they can be designed and scoped to fit your schedule. So it could be anywhere from 1 to 3 credit hours, and that's really based not just on time, right, and scheduling, everyone's busy, but also the scope of activities that you and the faculty mentor agree to. So what is the actual sort of steps to pursuing a 590? So first, of course, you need to talk to the faculty mentor. We do have a lot of faculty in our school. The best way to get some quick overview of some of the programs of research that people lead is to visit the website, so you can see sort of what faculty profiles are saying, what people are publishing in, what active grants people have. Approaching that faculty member, seeing if they have the time and the projects that meet your interests. Of course, discuss this with your academic advisor next if there is an opportunity that is there. And then it's important to complete the 590 form. So this is the way that you take those discussions and put them onto paper so everybody knows, the faculty mentor and how what you'll be doing over that semester during this 590, what's expected of you. And it just keeps things transparent and make sure that everyone is on the same page. And you can talk with Maricel Velus in the registrar's office about this, and also the curriculum office would have the most up-to-date form for the 590. And so quickly, here are just some examples that you may want to get involved in for the upcoming academic year for these 590s. A doctoral student in our program, Rory O'Brien, currently is working with a really cool intervention project with schools in LA County. There are multiple schools involved in this, and it's a civic engagement intervention focused specifically on sexual and gender minority youth. So you can see here, it's a really in-depth qualitative methods experience. Rory is doing a lot of information around gathering around focus groups, interviews, policy scans. So getting an experience with Rory, you would be able to work with them to, not just gather this information, but then actually get some experience in how you analyze qualitative data. And then my own sort of work, one of the projects I'm part of is the LA County Child and Adolescent Suicide Review Team. So this happens once a month during the school year. I will be upfront with you, there is a lot of emotional labor with this work. It is difficult work to do, but it's very important work to do. It is a multidisciplinary team of folks that get together. This includes people from LAUSD, people from the county mental health, I believe the district's attorney's office. So a lot of folks get together to review these adolescent suicide cases. And we try to glean from this conversation, from documentation and interviews, any sort of identifiers for prevention. Dr. Henwood in our school has a absolutely phenomenal program of research around unhoused populations and how to prevent homelessness. So you can see here a couple of the examples of the projects that he has going on in his center around learning more about the experience of unhoused people in LA, but then also sort of figuring out this giant architecture of services for unhoused people in the county. For a lot of you who are new to LA, or for anyone who has seen the news, being unhoused and homelessness populations and issues around homelessness are huge for LA County. So Dr. Henwood has some really, really cool projects going on that you all can get involved in. And so, I'll round this out by saying research needs social workers. I tell this to my 546 class. My plea to you all is that, when I teach that class, I am not trying to make you into a statistician. I'm not trying to, make you into a person who does randomized controlled trials. What we try to do is, get you that research experience so you can, kind of get your position at that table as a social worker, and then you bring your expertise. From my perspective, I don't need you to know how to do a hierarchical linear model. I don't need you to know about, multi-stage probability-based sampling. But what I do need you to do is get to that table that the researchers are meeting to, and bring your expertise in social work. That's what you should bring, is your expertise in social work, your expertise in working with communities, because researchers are not always trained and not commonly trained in how to do that. And that's where social work really shines. So, you can think about where you may land in social work, whether it be micro, meso, or macro practice. But what I really want to impart to everybody is that team science is where, social work can really change research. And again, it's not about you knowing everything about the methods, you knowing everything about the sampling, but it's you being the voice at the table to ask folks who are doing those things to say, are your efforts and methods incorporating social work values? Are you remembering the people behind the numbers that you were gathering? And that's the thing with research. A lot of times the lives and the stories of the people behind the surveys, behind the interviews, they can get lost. And that's where social work shines in helping to make research better. And so that's basically my spiel. So I will stop sharing my screen. And if there's any questions, I think we may have time for a few questions. But otherwise, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Dr. Blosnich. At this moment, I do not see if we have any questions, but we are definitely going to share the information that you gave us. So if anyone does, any questions do arise, they can contact you via email. Thank you. For our next presenter, we have Dr. Carrie Doyle. Carrie Doyle is an associate professor of practical education at the University of Southern Suzanne Dworak-Peck School of Social Work, where she has taught MSW students since 2011. Her professional interests include trauma, sensitive mindfulness, secondary traumatic stress, and trauma treatment and outcomes. Her doctoral research at the University of Pennsylvania focused on crisis response and recovery after mass targeted gun violence in schools. Carrie received her MSW from Columbia University and her Bachelor's of Arts from Brown University with a focus on political science. Today's presentation are her findings from a qualitative study of 3 school district social workers' experiences providing crisis response and recovery after mass targeted gun violence. But without further ado, please welcome Ms. Carrie Doyle.
Great, thank you. Good morning, and thank you, Sulamita, and thank you to the Phi Alpha Honor Society for inviting me to present my research findings today. Today, I would like to share with you an overview of my research study, Lessons Learned, a qualitative study of school social workers' experiences providing crisis response and recovery after mass targeted gun violence. Before I start, I just want to mention that this study is about the aftermath of gun violence. So some of the information or the images may be activating for some of you. Slide. The following is a list of schools that have experienced mass targeted gun violence since Columbine High School. Unfortunately, I do not foresee an end to this senseless violence unless major social and educational policy changes occur in the United States. All gun violence is not considered mass or targeted gun violence, so I want to provide a working definition of this term, which was used for my study. So 2 or more deaths resulting from the gun violence, and the word targeted as defined by the Secret Service is when an attacker selects a target prior to the attack. Slide. And actually, you could just advance it one more as well, please. Thank you. As a former school social worker and a social work educator, I wanted to explore whether MSW programs were preparing school social workers for crisis response and recovery. And what I realized was there was a gap in the literature around this, specifically as it pertains to social workers. So there was 3 research questions as part of my study. Did school social workers feel prepared by their MSW education and training to provide this crisis intervention, support, and trauma recovery services? What was the professional and personal impact providing this? And what were the implications for advancing social work education? Slide. So the methodology, and I know I'm going through this quickly, but I want to make sure I give you as much information in a short period of time. So this study, again, focused on MSW social workers that either worked at schools that experienced mass targeted gun violence or who were hired in the immediate aftermath of this violence. Purposive and snowball sampling was used. Recruiting was initially a challenge. Originally, I had a more expansive recruitment effort that really focused on national school social work professional organizations, as well as posts on social media, but I received no response. And really, given the sensitivity of this research topic, I could understand why school social workers might not respond to unsolicited outreach. I was able to request facilitated introductions through collegial contacts that I had. These contacts had connections with 3 impacted school districts. And due to this, I was able to recruit 12 participants from 3 different school districts. 2 interviews, approximately 45 to 60 minutes in length, were conducted with each participant over Zoom. And again, given the sensitivity of the research topic and the need for confidentiality, participants were asked to select a pseudonym and given the option to turn off their cameras during the recording. Slide, and if actually you could forward one more slide as well, please. So my findings. 3 major themes emerged from participant feedback: the power of connection, the impact of trauma, and the gaining of social work skills and knowledge. Now, again, due to the limitations of my time today, I'm just going to be providing a select few of the findings, but if you're interested in more of the findings, you can certainly find my dissertation online by just Googling it, or I can certainly send the link as well. So regarding the question around skills preparation, the majority of participants felt like they felt moderately prepared for crisis intervention. However, most concerning to me was that half the participants were unable to name the intervention or the theoretical underpinning as to why they were using the intervention. Many of the participants attribute it to using their instincts. And from a social work education perspective, I believe it's critical that MSW social workers are able to name the intervention and the reason that they're using that intervention. I think it brings legitimacy to our profession. The second finding I want to just quickly touch upon today was what the participants learned about trauma. So one pattern that emerged around trauma was that it really is a non-linear process of recovery. So yearly time markers, seasonal reminders, additional school shootings, all of these required the social workers or the participants to continually reset or readdress the activation or the reactivation of symptoms within their students, their faculty, and their parents within the community. Slide. Another idea that emerged is that social workers and other mental health professionals are emotional first responders. They are often there in the initial stages, from parental notification of death and injuries to the immediate aftermath of connecting students and families, triaging, meeting basic needs, to the more ongoing intermediate phases of providing more long-term emotional support. And all of the participants in this study mentioned the weight of holding space for students, families, faculty within their school. They highlighted that they thought it was incredibly helpful, the role they were serving and the intervention they were providing by holding this space, but that it definitely weighed on them heavy. And you'll see a quote from one of the participants discussing how heavy they found it and that they were left with this feeling. Many of the participants were hesitant to process or share their experiences with others due to concerns about confidentiality, as well as they were concerned about others' ability to handle such horrific details. Slide. All of the participants in this study reported personal and professional impacts from the stress and the intensity of the response. And again, this was a long-term process. So sleep and appetite disturbance, anxiety, physical ailments, stomach issues, exhaustion, brain fog, some boundary issues that they experienced as well. Slide. Protective factors. So one of the questions I asked around this discussion was the supports and coping mechanisms they use to manage this emotional impact. And you can see a summary from the slide. But a critical component that was identified was effective supervision. So only about a fourth of the participants felt that they received effective supervision. So much of the supervision they received was consistent with a lot of logistical information and case consultation, which every participant agreed was helpful because many described their communities as very divided and angry after the shootings. And these participants felt like they were under a microscope. So they felt like this case support and consultation was incredibly important. But what they did identify as a missing component of supervision and support was the ability, their own ability to process their feelings and experiences with other colleagues who had shared this experience. Slide. So I was actually surprised by this finding when it first emerged, and then I kept hearing it over and over and over again from different participants. And actually 3 of the participants thanked me after our first interview because they said it was the first time anyone asked how they felt or ask them to share their experiences. And I just want to read what this individual said. I was very lucky to be in group supervision. They were supportive. We always gave each other an attempt to be vulnerable. So again, it was really this missing component of shared support and connection. Slide. So again, all three districts that the participants were from offered them some sort of support. So all three districts offered employee assistance counseling, mindfulness, yoga activities after school. And the responses I received was that this was important supports in the short term, but they were just too exhausted to participate in these activities. Two participants felt that their district offered formal opportunities to emotionally process the experience with their colleagues. An additional participant mentioned that it was a one-time offering that they had the chance to process with other colleagues. Slide. Now, the participants who were not offered formal opportunities to process found a way. So they found informal methods to connect with their colleagues, whether it was daily text check-ins, impromptu morning meetings. A few participants paired up with each other to provide this informal connection, support, and the ability to process. Slide. So just really quickly, the strengths and limitations of this study. The strengths, I was able to have participants from each school district, so there was not one single point of view. The methods were designed to prevent re-traumatization. Limitations, sample size. So I was asking participants to basically relive an experience that was a tragedy. So the sample size was definitely small, and the interviews were conducted retrospectively. So sometimes memory isn't as accurate in retrospect. Slide. So just in conclusion, just some recommendations based off the findings. I would propose the following recommendations to school districts. So provide social workers the opportunity to process both in a group and an individual aspect with their colleagues when they are asked to provide crisis response and recovery. Don't do this during work hours. The hours are long, providing support and intense. So include it in their work hours rather than after their work. Prepare educators and social workers around effective supervision. So that supervision, helping social work supervisors to find a balance between case consultation, which the participants said was helpful, and that processing component. Again, I was really taken aback by how many of the participants said nobody asked them what it was like for them. Nobody asked them to process it. They were asked to give support to others, and many of the participants did not feel supported. Slide. And then just implications for social work education. So as a social work educator, the implications I think that are important for social work education. First, I think there's an opportunity for MSW programs to emphasize the importance of naming the intervention and the reason for its use for a specific intervention. So understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it, and not attributing it to merely instincts. We are trained professionals, and I think that, again, just adds professional legitimacy. And then, although my specific study focused on crisis response and recovery after gun violence, participants mentioned that there are other school crises on a smaller scale that require these same crisis response skills. So examples could be death by suicide, death by motor vehicle accidents, illness, the pandemic. So due to the significant acute and accumulative trauma in schools today, I would recommend that all school social workers be trained in Trauma 101 so they understand the impact of trauma on the brain, and psychological first aid. So trauma courses are often electives in many MSW programs, but I would propose it be a requirement for school social work students. And then finally, teaching that self-care is not just taking a day off or attending a yoga class. And I'm a big fan of yoga, but self-care is so much more than that. It's good boundary management, it's self-awareness, and it is that processing component. And so many of actually all of the participants recognized symptoms of secondary traumatic stress as they were giving to others. And many of them recognized that they weren't engaging in self-care during this. And so I think, I know this was added to our NASW Code of Ethics. I think the opportunity to train social workers on the fullness, the completeness of what self-care can look like. And again, that could be boundary management, and that could be the ability to process our own feelings, so we are not holding space for everyone and depleting ourselves. So again, that is just a quick overview. If anyone's interested, you can certainly find my entire dissertation online, and it goes into each of the different findings as it relates to trauma, as it relates to school social work training. So thank you all. And if anybody had any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Dr. Doyle. I do not see any questions on the chat, but I do have one question in regards to psychological first aid.
Yes.
Where can, as an MSW student, receive that training?
The wonderful thing about psychological first aid is it is, you don't necessarily have to receive it in an MSW program. Although there's a school social work training program that we do during the summer that we do offer it, but you can find it online. So Dr. Marlene Wong, our well-known doctor from USC, she actually created psychological first aid, Listen, Teach, Connect, Protect, LPC. So you can actually find that online. And the wonderful thing is she recorded videos I think in 2020 during the pandemic, Dr. Wong did, and they are public. So you can actually see them. So much of the PFA information for students who are interested, they can find that online in the public domain.
Great, thank you. So we can go ahead and just Google it, and then we'll find it.
Yeah, you'll find it. If you look, you'll find it on YouTube. If you do Dr. Marlene Wong, psychological first aid, you will see the videos that she, and I see there's a free link. Yeah, so psychological first aid is definitely in the public domain. I'm biased to Dr. Wong's because her so many years within the school system that I feel like she really captured it so well. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your research and your presentation.
Thank you so much for inviting me today.
Thank you. Hope you have a great day. And for our next presenter, we have Dr. Gold. She is an assistant professor at the University of Pikesville's School of Social Work and the co-advisor for the Phi Omega chapter of Phi Alpha. The first part of her career included clinical crisis and case management with foster youth, trauma and substance use treatment. Dr. Gold went on to work with high-risk university students as a clinical case manager at the University of Kentucky, providing clinical crisis and case management services. It was during this time that she developed her passion for working with university students and educating social workers. She completed her DSW in 2022 at the University of Kentucky. As a DSW student, she worked to develop a student organization to build relationships and networking opportunities for fellow DSW students. Her interest in making change in social work education includes student retention in the online learning platform, meeting the psychosocial of online students, and student issues including crisis prevention, adjustment to college, and housing and food insecurity among students. Today, Dr. Gold presents a systematic literature review examining if and how four-year universities with a focus on social work programs are meeting the psychosocial needs of their online learners. From the results of her research, she will be providing recommendations for social work programs to increase capacity for meeting the needs of online learners. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Gold.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get my camera turned on and there we go. Thank you so much. Okay. So thanks so much for introducing me. I am really excited to share my research. I know we have just a limited amount of time, so I apologize if I talk really fast because this is really a passion of mine. I'm going to share my screen and pull up my PowerPoint. So sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical issues. It is very windy where I'm at, so I apologize if my computer runs a little bit slow. Oh. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Okay. All right, so without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so we, when I thought about taking this project on as my DSW capstone, there's a couple different components of my capstone, but today I'm really just going to process the systematic literature review. So really the why of this is that students were showing an increased need for mental health services as we roll out of the pandemic. I was in the DSW program during the pandemic, and I was in a fully online DSW program. So that kind of shone some light on some of the services that we were lacking with our student population, not just at the university that I was at, but across the globe in social work programs. And as social work programs continue to venture toward being solid online programs, most of our programs, even undergrad programs, have a hybrid component to it at a lot of universities, and many MSW programs and DSW programs are solely online now. I think that really speaks to the need to have some attention to meeting the psychosocial needs of our online learners, especially with our social work students. So really, if you think about traditional learners, they're at the highest risk for emerging mental health concerns. And so what we know now is that our online programs are not just for adult non-traditional learners, they're for everyone. We have traditional learners engaging in our online programs just the same as we do older adults as well. So we really need to pay attention to that critical window of when mental health concerns really start evolving as part of this. In addition to that, 40% of social work students, when they enter their program, have a history of mental health concerns. So that's a very high number. And then one of the things that was striking to me is that 42% of our students in social work programs have been exposed to 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. That really speaks to the amount of trauma and mental health concerns that our social work students are bringing with them into our online programs and our brick and mortar campuses as well. Social work students are at high risk for experiencing vicarious and secondary trauma because we are exposed to many things, not only in our field placements that we engage in as social work students, but also those of us who are also working in the field simultaneously as we're taking social work classes as well. And also a lot of our content and our coursework is very it could be very triggering as well because of the different high-risk situations that we naturally address as part of our coursework. So that's something for us all to be aware of. And those pieces really just are building blocks to the reasons why we need to meet our psychosocial needs of our online social work students. And so when students are engaging in online platforms, they're coming from many different environments, geographical, cultural, diversity factors, all those things are being brought together across the nation and beyond into one classroom. Whereas traditional in-person students, we are still a very diverse group of individuals. However, we're all experiencing somewhat of the same experience because we're in the confines of a college campus. Even if we live on the outskirts of the college campus, we're still somewhat connected to the college campus. And so that campus environment can be somewhat controlled, of course, not fully controlled. But when you're a global student, there's so many different pockets of situations that are going on that you're faced with individually as a student that you're not necessarily experiencing the same events in a vacuum like you might necessarily in a brick and mortar kind of campus situation. So we're bringing all of that in as an online student to our classrooms, our virtual classrooms, which is so important in the field of social work. It could be an absolute blessing, but it can also be a hindrance as we engage in this process, because we have lots of things that we're coping with that other learners may not also be experiencing the same situation. So we can be very isolated in that. But the beauty of that is we're really experiencing how social work is developing and interacting and doing all the good work that we do across the nation and beyond. So our students can really bring that wealth of information into the online classroom and really learn from each other and their experiences in that. So that is the benefit to it. However, the drawback is it could really absolutely isolate us as students. So something to be very aware of as we teach our online learners. Students lack the connection of campus, peers, instructors, and mental health concerns. Are causes for students to make the choice to leave their institution. So because they don't have this connection and this sense of belonging, it can absolutely impact our retention rates. And when I say connection to campus, when we are engaging in a brick and mortar campus situation, we're walking through campus, we're engaging with different students, different professors, different situations. We see the placards for different clubs or different opportunities to really engage with the campus community. Whereas when we're in an online program, we experience that in a sense of isolation as well. And we may not feel that sense of, I'm really connected to not only my university, but my campus, my peers, and my professors that I see face to face. So as professors, we really need to be intentional about how we develop that connection. And I'll talk more about that here in a few minutes. And so that absolutely can cause mental health concerns to rise as well amongst our students. Online students experience a unique set of needs, and I think we all are pretty aware of this, that may look very different than their in-person counterparts because they feel maybe less valued by the institutional culture. They may experience a difficulty balancing life expectations, time management, having multiple commitments. We see that a lot, especially with our MSW and DSW students, where they may be working a full-time social work job, as well as engaging in field work and our social work program, and then also balancing life, the different commitments that we have, be it if you're a parent or you're taking care of your parents or anything in between. And so they're really balancing this multiple life expectations that can really cause them to struggle, have increased senses of anxiety, and maybe really hinder their ability to complete the coursework that is being offered and that they have to manage themselves in an online platform. That also creates a feeling of isolation and maybe some experiences where they feel like maybe not anybody else is maybe experiencing the same life struggles that they might be experiencing because they're not engaging with each other and socializing like they would in a classroom. So these are really the foundation points for wanting to engage in this a little bit deeper and find out what services are we really offering our students in online programs. So I utilize a systematic literature review. I initially wanted to look primarily at social work programs, but there is just not enough evidence out there, not enough research has been done. So there's a huge gap in the literature and research that really needs to be filled. So I expanded this out to looking at colleges and universities in general with a focus on social work students and social work programs. And so that allowed me to have a broadened search. I also included international programs as long as they were not specific to open distance learning platforms. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So a lot of the research that I got was not only from our nation with the United States, but also outside international situations or universities who are engaging in online learning for a long period of time now. So they have a lot more research. 3 databases were utilized, including Google Scholar, the University of Kentucky's InfoCat, and Social Work Abstracts. And Social Work Abstracts also encompassed ERIC and APA PsycInfo. The parameter on the years was between 2011 and 2021. Search terms varied slightly between engines just because of the responses they generated. There was really no other purpose for that other than to try to get more information because there was not a whole lot of research. The inclusion criteria was full text because I needed to have access to the full article. Obviously, it had to be written in English, focused on online platforms of student learning, specifically in higher education, looking at four-year institutions. It could not be community colleges. There was one caveat to that where there was an article that also encompassed information from community colleges, but it was very clear to see the research that went into the four-year programs and parse out the community colleges. So I included that in. That was an exception to that because I focused and just only pulled out that four-year information. And then they also needed to specifically address meeting the psychosocial needs of online students in four-year institutions. There's lots of information about on-campus students. There's much less information about online students in their bachelor's and master's level programs. I did not look at doctoral work as part of this. Once I utilized that inclusion and exclusion criteria, 49 articles seemed to fit. And with additional review and more specific reading of the articles, I found that only 12 met the inclusion and criteria, and only 3 of those 12 were actually specific to social work programs in general. The rest were very generalized to universities. Content from the 12 articles were organized in a Word document, including the study citation, the country in which the information was gathered, the sample theories, outcomes, and results. And then I utilized those charts to really look and process the information and draw the conclusions to the research. The results is what I found was that there was a lot of information about facilitating social connection as being key to promoting success in college students in online programs. So really looking at communication and relationships, fostering that success and belonging and connection. And this wasn't only just with their peers, but also with professors. Professors played a huge role in that retention and connection piece. And the development of relationships with professors really shown as being key to success and reduction of anxiety, increased empathy, and discussions related to the topics of the course, and really connecting all those pieces together. So those connections improved understanding of the topics of the course and really helped students feel a sense of belonging within their programs. And then again, that engagement of professors, kind of diving into that a little bit deeper, it made a difference in the online learner experience, including links to academic success, students' persistence in the program, and satisfaction. And what we know about all those things is the persistence in the program, and of course the satisfaction and wonderful student academic success as well, really maintains retention in online programs. So that is so important. And professors are really the key to that. And then when students expressed that professors were willing to communicate with them, they had a greater sense of connection and reduced feelings of isolation. And so with that communication, they really wanted professors to be able to be reachable outside of the classroom, outside of office hours. So of course, when you're in an asynchronous program, you're not engaging in a classroom. So looking at having synchronous sessions as part of that may be optional because not every student can attend, or saying, here's my cell phone number, please reach out to me if you have a question, text me, and then having a quick response, or responding to emails in less than 24 hours. All of those things fostered that sense of connection and satisfaction, reducing feelings of isolation of students having to go at the coursework alone. And then building in opportunities for students to engage with teachers beyond the online course platform to facilitate interaction was also a huge predictor of success. So like I said, the synchronous classes in an asynchronous program, maybe having course cafes or coffee hours where just the professor pops on and students can come in and chat not only about the coursework, but also any pertinent information related to social work in general. Student support services were huge. And what we found, again, this is kind of during the pandemic. Of course, during the pandemic, all of our universities went online, and with that came a shift in student support services also having to be accessible online. But what we've seen is that gradual shift back, kind of that pendulum swinging back, if you will. So where student support services are now kind of being more focused on our in-person classes and student success versus our online. And so some of those things were still lingering and are still good. Like, for example, universities really increased increasing their access to things like the student counseling centers and that sort of thing. But students are really still struggling with being able to find those resources and having access to them as online learners. So in that one article that I talked about that really looks at community colleges versus four-year programs, they found that out of 10 universities, four-year universities that they looked at, only 4 or 40% scored adequate or exemplary for post-enrollment support. So there was lots of support from the beginning where students were getting a lot of good information about the services that were offered to them. But after they had enrolled and we were really engaging in the components of the education pieces, they did not have access to the same items or readily access. So this included items such as counseling, early alerts, academic coaching, tutoring, personal development opportunities, and availability to participate in campus and student organizations. And that's another key component here. There's a lot of campus and student organizations that are very specific to on-campus students and a much more limited range of organizations that are really built around online student engagement. And then disconnection from campus. Students identifying feeling different from their on-campus counterparts. And then this was really another trigger for this was when emails were not specific to online learners. So they were getting a lot of email messages and communication that they never could engage with that information. So it was, come to this campus event or whatever it may be. If you're, living miles away, you're not going to get to come to that campus event. So again, being really intentional about what comes out to the online learners versus what goes out to the campus community as a whole really can help that sense of belonging to the campus environment. I'm so sorry. And click. Okay. So applications to social work education. One of the things that we need to be aware of is on-campus service need to be offered to online learners. That's just really the meat and potatoes of this research. If you're going to offer it to your campus students, the same opportunities for success need to also be offered to our online students as well. It should be the same across the board because that creates a situation to where your campus learners really have a higher opportunity for success versus the success support services that your online students are also engaging in. We need to have purposeful attempts to connect online students to campus. So this may be through clubs, organizations, sharing a live event where students can participate virtually or something of that nature, looking at sporting events and how they travel and offering student tickets to, maybe an event that's happening in their hometown to where they can go see their sports team and get engaged that way. Just kind of thinking outside the box to really connect students to their campus so they feel a sense of belonging to their actual physical campus, even though they may not step foot on it until graduation. Professors, of course, play a large role in facilitating of belonging and connection, and I cannot harp on that enough. We really need professors to be engaged with their students from day one of the class and really to help students feel connected not only to the professor themselves, but to each other as peers. And then awareness of course development to support connection beyond discussion posts. Discussion posts was one thing that came up in the research that students kind of had a mixed emotion to that. Some students really liked that engagement and others just felt like it was busy work. So we have to be more intentional as professors at how we build those discussion posts and how we could really mirror that classroom facilitation of discussions through that. Again, with global social work happening and coming together in an online program, it is so very important for us to be able to utilize that resource of the knowledge that each of us have as social workers and the work that we're doing, be it practicum placements or actual work in our communities in social work. We could really tap into that knowledge and they could really educate one another so broadly on the field of social work and so diversely when we are purposeful about those discussion posts. Connection being built from day one, both with professors and with the course, the other peers in the course. And that could be a little bit more difficult in these larger classrooms. And I kind of push back to universities, especially in online programs where, seats don't have to necessarily be filled. We need to be vigilant about the number of participants we have in online classrooms because that the larger the participants, the less connection may happen. So if we're going to be intentional about that connection and awareness of the social and the psychosocial needs, the mental health needs of our students from professors, we really need to be able to have them be able to have the opportunity to really engage purposely with each one of their students. We need to have crisis support services for our students. They need to be able to be monitored even in an online platform. If there's a mental health need, that professors are still the front line of identification with this, even in an online program. And it could be the only identification in an online program because they're not coming through campus and coming in contact with other different entities on campus where people might notice the changes in mental health needs and that sort of thing. But we need to make sure that crisis support is happening and that professors and adjunct professors in particular need to know the campus resources that they can refer students to, and there needs to be intentional support of our online students to help build them up when there is a crisis. And I'm not talking a emergent crisis like suicidality or harm to others. I'm talking about the long-term mental health concerns that might be coming up, or somebody's parent passed away, or something tragic happened to them, or there was something that happened in their community that they need support around. Who do we refer them to, and how do we offer them support while still keeping that barrier of having good boundaries ourselves as their professor, not their social worker? And so that brings me to my next point of case management for social work programs is so huge, especially in larger universities that might be able to financially meet that need, where you have a case manager specific to the College of Social Work that meets the needs not only of the campus students, but also the online students as well, to have that point person to where a professor can refer someone to a clinical case manager to where they can actually reach out to the student and help them meet their basic needs or whatever needs that they're struggling with from any area across the nation or globally. Faculty and peer mentoring, I really feel like speaks for itself. I won't spend a lot of time on that. I'm not sure where I am right now with my time. And then
I'm gonna have to stop you right there really quickly. I want to say thank you so much. I think we're up for time and we have
okay, thank you.
We have a
thank
couple
you.
questions really quickly. Do you mind
Yes.
answering one?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we had just one question in the chat. With online students in your research, how do you feel students can be supported socially with our campus to decrease mental health illnesses?
I'm so sorry, you broke up on me. Can you repeat that?
How do you feel students can be supported socially with our campus to decrease mental health illnesses?
So from campus, I really want to speak to kind of one of the things that was talked about in my bio. We can absolutely develop our own support programs to meet those needs. They would have to be absolutely specific to having their, services for their being. I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought because I opened the chat and it's distracting me. I'm so sorry. They have to be specific to meeting the support needs of online learners, because they're going to be so broad depending on where they are located globally. They may not have access to like referrals to a mental health provider within their location in proximity to them. And so we have to be very purposeful about building resources on our campus to be able to meet the mental health needs of their students. And it may be through telehealth. There's lots of different applications out there that are free for students, different apps to where they can actually meet with a licensed provider, and the university subscribes to those so they can have online telehealth services to meet their mental health needs, and it could be free to them. There's also different programs out there, like the University of Pikeville uses UWIL and Kooth. Those are two. Kooth is very new, I believe, to the United States in general, but those are two really great resources, for example, that they can have online connection to a mental health provider. So it doesn't have to burden our college campus counseling centers that are already really overwhelmed with students and that sort of thing. They may not have the providers to meet the needs, or might not be able to practice across state lines, but there is lots of different programs that are emerging that can really help with the mental health needs. I also think being purposeful about offering support groups can be very beneficial, and that's something that our campus support services can do, and that can help students feel very connected to campus as well. And that can be open to students that are actually physically on campus, as well as our online students. So that brings that sense of belonging together and connectivity, but also supports their mental health services needs as well through those services. And if they're psycho-ed, they're not treatment. So therefore, you don't have to worry about any kind of licensing boundaries of states and that sort of thing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gold. We really appreciate you taking.
Yes. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you all so much for listening.
Thank you. I hope you have a great day.
You too. Thank you so much. And if there's any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for our next presenter, we have Mr. Dan Field. Dan Field is the clinical director for Westside Gambling Treatment. He brings over 10 years working with problem gamblers and their families in private practice, and has served as a program director for the Beat Chival Right Action Gambling Program in Los Angeles, California. In addition to his clinical work, Dan serves as an adjunct professor at the USC School of Social Work, where he trains graduate level social workers on addiction and mental health. He also provides clinical supervision for licensed gambling addiction specialists through the UCLA Gambling Studies Program. And then Dan would also be joined today with Joel Soper, who is the author of Never Enough Zeros. Everyone, please welcome Mr. Field and Joel Soper.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I assume that everyone can hear me and can see Joel and I. Joel, do you want to give a shout out to just test the technology before we get going?
Yeah, 100%. Joel Soper, Never Enough Zeros, compulsive gambler, now helping people along, with Dan. Hopefully everybody can hear us and see us.
Okay. So we're sharing the screen now, and these are, the green picture is a little dated of me, but I'm going to go with it. It was the best shot that I had. So Joel and I met in the context of a counselor-counselee relationship when we were in residential treatment. Joel is along for the ride for this presentation and along for the ride generally in promoting safer sports betting because of his own addiction, which started off in adolescence and really kind of ballooned in his college years. And was one of the defining addictions, or probably the defining addiction of his adult life. And Joel, I just want you to be aware of time. We only have 15 minutes for the entire thing.
Okay.
You can tell us a little bit about your experience with sports betting and addiction.
Okay, so my story starts when I was 16 years old, working for a bookmaker in Detroit, Michigan. And that's how I got into that world. Basically, writing down the bets and listening and learning from him. And, I never stopped. So it progressed when I was in college. I was betting, a couple $1,000s a week, fast forward to, my adult life and, owning a business in California. And the numbers just got bigger and bigger, and the amount of plays just got bigger and bigger. So I was in action all day, every day.
Right. And a lot of the money that he generated from work and from sales, and Joel, I'm not modest, or I don't want to be inaccurate. He's a very good salesman, but I found in working with gamblers that sometimes there is something about the persuasive sales, and when you make a sale, there's a dopamine reaction to that, similar to when you're in action betting on sports. So Joel's ability at selling fueled his gambling addiction, and that's something that I've noticed in my work with clients. And I've worked with gambling addiction, as was said in the introduction, for about 10 years. But I have seen a real increase in sports betting and digital gaming addictions really in the last 5 years, and particularly during COVID. And I just wanted to call attention to some of the facts around sports betting and funding for gaming addiction. Right now, despite efforts by the National Coalition on Problem Gambling, there is no federal funding for treatment of gambling disorders. That will soon change. And there's also going to be some regulatory issues, or regulatory approaches to curbing this epidemic in the future. But right now, it seems like there's too much money in the game, and there's a lot of sort of just open-ended advertisements for FanDuels and DraftKings, and it seems that people are pretty enamored of this since the 2018 Supreme Court decision, which opened up sports betting on a state-by-state basis. As you guys probably know, the two propositions that were on the California ballot were defeated, but that does not mean that Californians are not betting on sports. They're finding creative ways to bet on sports, and through the use of VPNs or friends that are bookies, etc. It's a real easy way to get into action. But look at the funding. We have funding for alcohol and drug abuse on the state level, 338 times that of funding for problem gamblers. So it gives you an idea of where the problem is, and that when people think about the term addiction, they think about drug addiction, they think about alcoholism. They don't think about gaming addictions, digital addictions, and gambling disorder. And so that's kind of what this presentation is about, to kind of open people's eyes that this is a real disorder. It's happening like wildfire on college campuses, on frat houses, at USC, at UCLA, all over the state. Sports bettors tend to be male. In my program, Westside Gambling Treatment, which is an online intensive outpatient program in which I treat just sports betting and gaming addiction and crypto and options trading. All of the inquiries have been either from parents who have a son who's gambling or the male gambler themselves. There's a belief that sports betting is more skill-based than luck, that people that go to the casino and play the slots are suckers. Why would anyone do that? Or put money on a roulette table? Why would anyone do that? And while arguably there's a modicum of luck in sports betting, the sports handicappers are, as Joel will say, Shylocks and charlatans. He was one. And the reality of it is that it's very, very, very rare that someone is going to eke out a living sports betting. And Joel, do you have a minute or so to comment on that, the handicapping and the whole luck versus skill-based elements of betting on sports?
100%. You hit it on the head. I mean, it's the odds of you becoming a successful gambler is about the same odds of you getting hit by lightning. They have, the bookies and the sports books, have it calculated where it's almost impossible for you to win. Now, yes, we do have this mentality that the sports gamblers are, smarter, and the casino people are inferior to us because we think that, the casinos have this huge advantage over them. And, it's a misnomer because, we can't account for human element in a sports game. A baseball shortstop letting the ball go right underneath his legs in an error. How are you going to equate for that? So the bottom line is it's about 92% luck when it comes to the sports gambling as well. So, the handicappers that are out there, like the Vegas Daves and the Steve Stevens and all these other guys that say they know this stuff and they have all this inside information, they're complete frauds, and they don't know anything that you don't already know. So there is no, get rich scheme. There is no inside information. It's all just to get your money, and it's a con. I've been doing this since I was 16. I'm 52. I recently quit. I wrote a book. I have a website, safesportsbetting.org. And, if you read the book and, you just listen to, my podcast and, what Dan has to say, you're going to see the realities of the sports gambling.
Right. And very quickly, we know that people that are betting on their phones or on their laptops are more susceptible to gaming disorder. And the new generation, the younger sports betting, are not going to sports books in Vegas or or elsewhere generally. They're finding ways to bet through their social contacts. This idea of a bookie with, with a baseball bat and a trench coat is outdated. The bookies are now other college students that are actually getting money, friends of friends, or friends in the social network that are facilitating sports betting. And a lot of the action happens on weekends. In frat houses at parties, people are drinking beer, hanging out, betting on sports. Critically now, people are doing live betting or in-game betting, which is different than back in the day where you would just bet on the result of a game. The 49ers are going to beat the Eagles by 3 points, and you're waiting for 3 hours to find out if you won. Now it's all about live betting. Joel has called live betting the crack cocaine of sports betting. Joel, can you tell us just a bit about live betting and its impact on gambling disorder?
Yeah, 100%. That was the game changer for me, Dan. Like I've told you before, it is the crack, because who in their, sports gambling history wants to wait 3 hours to see if your team is going to win when you have all these different options that are live, which are first quarters, first periods, first innings. You're literally betting and getting the result sometimes within minutes. Okay. And you're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars that are wagered in that time frame. So yeah, when live betting came into play, which is approximately about 10 to 12 years ago, it just changed the whole dynamic of sports betting. And the sports books and the bookies, they just capitalized. It used to be the one thing you can bet on the game was the total or the line itself. That was it. Now on each particular game, there's probably 500 to 600 proposition bets on one game. So you go from 2 bets to 500 to 600, and now you're talking about literally betting play by play or inning by inning. So it definitely.
The term that I heard recently is the slotification of sports betting. So the model is the slot machine. So whether or not Kershaw is going to, pitch a strike or a ball or a base hit, then it's
right.
on the next bet. So you can lose everything during the course of a single Dodgers game.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, we got about 5 minutes.
Oh, Dan, one other quick thing too. There's a new thing called micro betting as well. I think it might be, similar to what you said, with the slot. What did you call it? I'm sorry.
Slotification of sports.
Yeah.
So I want everyone to think about sports betting as a slot machine for people with ADD and short attention spans. And I lost, and then I'm getting back in action. The whole component of gambling addiction, as opposed to alcohol addiction, is the notion of chasing. I just lost $100. I'm going to get it back. I just lost $500. I'm going to get it back. It's the chase, and it can happen on micro levels during the course of a Dodgers game, like slot machines.
Yes, and that's exactly how it is, and that's how they're marketed. You have these big name people like Jake Paul and Logan Paul that have these apps that you can bet on every pitch or every thing in a baseball game. It's absolutely crazy.
Right. And so I talked to a number of sports betting, specifically doing qualitative studies with them. One of the distorted thoughts about gambling is that I can control my gambling. And much like an alcoholic can't control their drinking, the loss of control and the disease model of addiction is really relevant to gaming disorder as well. So one of the things I do in therapy is to really kind of tease out their belief that they're talented at sports betting or whatever. Usually they've been humbled by some pretty devastating losses before they've come to me. The goal is to arrest this disorder before it becomes financially devastating. And I have worked with people, both staff members and students at USC, that are in scenarios where they're bringing paper bags of money to the bookie downtown type of things. Good kids, quote unquote, that would never imagine themselves in a situation in which they're going to ATMs, taking out tons of money and delivering it to the sports book. In my program, Westside Gambling Treatment, funded by the state, You can call me directly. It's a free program. We talk about money management, financial literacy, building back relationships, building trust in relationships, communication skills, and boundaries. So in order to get into the program, best to contact me at my email at USC, or just call me directly to find out more about the program. I'm also in private practice, and I see clients individually who would rather go to my brick and mortar office and do an individual session with me. And we have 1 minute, Joel. So any parting statements about your work and passion around this issue?
Yeah, once again, I've been a compulsive gambler my whole life, and recently have stopped, wrote the book, and I want to just tell people that it is possible to stop and to have a better life. I created an organization called safesportsbetting.org that people can go ahead and look at for any questions or anything when it comes to if they think they do have a compulsive gambling problem. But other than that, just be very careful, reach out, utilize the tools that Dan has and that I have to, really be careful out there.
Great. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you both for your presentation. We do have a question for both Dan and Joel. For Dan, as a provider, when you were speaking about distorted thoughts, it kind of reminded me a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy. So with that said, what have you seen is the best intervention when working with individuals with a gambling addiction? And with that said, Joel, as a client, what is something that you would want to see from providers who are working with this type of population?
Well, basically, my point of it is a CBT oriented intervention, noticing times where you're triggered and to prevent that trigger from becoming a craving where you're placing the bet, and to bind yourself from different, websites, self-binding. There's something called Gamban that I encourage people to put on their phones as a preventative, and then analyzing some of their distorted thoughts about money, power, status, and picking those apart just a little bit, coupled with my own psychodynamic approach where I'm building rapport, I'm talking about childhood messages, about status and money, relationships with parents, getting a sense if there's an underlying mood disorder and picking apart that as best that I can. So it's a combination of psychodynamic and CBT.
And to answer the question you had for me, I just really like to see the counselors more like Dan, that they realize that, there is some extreme possibilities of danger like suicide, criminality, losing everything, financially, losing relationships. And I want them to realize that they need to take this very serious, do their homework, see how it works, how, it is a progressive illness, and just know what they're talking about and know how to handle the compulsive gambler, because, we're a very, very odd bunch of people.
Yeah. And with younger college age clients, I tend to be blunt and specific because of their views of therapy and soft and coddling. I can look at the spreadsheet, and that's the advantage of working with numbers and money in addiction. I do a cost analysis. How many hours have you been gambling? How much money have you lost? They always underreport, but then I'll basically say, oh, so you lost about $125 an hour gambling. And that can be a really painful pill, but they need, because I don't know with younger clients, I have a pretty good track record of people staying in therapy with me, but I don't know if I'm going to get them for a session or 2 or 3 and they're one and done type thing. So I really try to use a blunt wake up call with my clients as best I can.
And just to expand on that a little bit, just make sure that they don't sugarcoat anything, because this is a real dangerous addiction that's going to get progressively worse. And that if they can nip it in the bud by any means necessary, whether it's bringing their family into the session or whatever it takes to nip this thing in the bud sooner than later, it's definitely going to be the thing that the therapist, should do for the compulsive gambler.
And very quickly, gambling becomes the solution to the problem that gambling causes. So
Right.
people just be intending, they think that, you know what, I'm just going to make the 25,000 back. I'm going to get back in action and then I'm out. It doesn't work that way. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And that's
Yeah.
part of gambling therapy as well. It just ain't going to work. It didn't work in the past and it's going to fail in the future.
The money's not coming back. That's what they need to get inside their mind. Just
Right.
replay the tape, what's happened time and time again. So
yeah.
Thank you again both for attending. And then we're also going to share your contact information in a post email that we're going to send out to everyone.
If you know anybody with the gambling problem, call Dan.
yeah, 100%. Dan's the best. He'll help
Wait, really quickly before you go, we have one quick question from somebody attending, and they wanted to know if stocks is considered a form of gambling.
Yeah, probably the most devastating one because especially I don't fully understand cryptocurrency. It's complicated, but I do understand financial loss and suicidal ideation, and people are losing their shirts. I have some heartbreaking recent stories of people losing everything very quickly, and so the same principles of chasing of getting back in action is absolutely true. So our program, Westside Gambling Treatment, specifically focuses trading and options trading, in addition to sports betting and online gaming, like and all of these things have different things. Like people play blackjack to kill the time online while they're thinking about what they're sports or crypto trading. So yes, very much crypto and options trading can be an addiction. So there's a good chance that you know someone whose gambling problem is getting out of hand. I think it's much more pervasive than anyone really imagines. So, reach out to us and we'll see if we can get them into treatment.
Thank you. We hope you both have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we are going to move on to our
shut it off.
Our break.
Oh.
Now we're going to move on to our break. I know I had mentioned 15-minute breaks, but in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and just have a 10-minute break. It is 10:36 right now. Actually, sorry, I'm seeing 10:35. We'll be back at 10:45. and was able to rest a little bit. And we're going to go ahead and continue on with our symposium by introducing 3 more organizations. The organization that is up next is the National Phi Alpha Honor Society, and the representative is our very own faculty advisor, Professor Sue Chen. Everyone, please welcome Professor.
Thank you, Sulamita. So I'm going to briefly talk about Phi Alpha, but before that, I want to thank all the attendees for your commitment to stay on with this entire research symposium. And I personally learned a lot from all the research opportunity available for students, gun violence in schools, online student mental health concerns and recommendations, as well as gambling. So I really appreciate your staying on for this research symposium. For this moment, as a part of the board of directors of National Phi Alpha Society, I want to share about the society. So Phi Alpha has been in existence since 1962, older than me. So I just turned 60 last year. And right now they are located physically at East Tennessee State University. We have a staff there. We also have an executive director, and there is about 8 or 9 board directors. So during academic year 2021-2022, we have over 6,500 new members, 11 new chapters that join National Phi Alpha. And to date, we have about 451 active chapters and over 170,000 lifelong members. So if you're a Phi Alpha chapter here today, if you can type in your name and the chapter you represented from, that would be really wonderful. Our event today is really to encourage, all the Phi Alpha member and chapters and advisor to join us. So it's going to be an international, national collaboration. Just kind of quickly, in 2019, National Phi Alpha was approved to join Association of College Honor Societies that consists of multiple different disciplines, nationally and also internationally. And then this is really the reason that set Phi Alpha apart from other honor societies. And then with that being said, Society of College Honor Society consists of engineering, psychology, lawyer, all kind of disciplines. So we have annual conference that we are also part of it. And we talked about all the consistent best practices. And I think that's in February, I attended a conference, and there is a lot of huge conversation in terms of how to support students' mental health. So that's a national theme that I'm seeing. So really quickly, our National Phi Alpha Honor Society hosts regular meetings with any advisor, any student leader on a monthly basis. And the topic is really different. It really depends on, what type of topic is relevant for advisor and the student members. So you're welcome to join. If your school hasn't had any National Phi Alpha Honor Society, you're welcome to develop one. And then we welcome you to join. So the purpose of the National Phi Alpha is really to increase our collaboration among all the students of social work and promote humanitarian goals and ideas. And we foster a very high standard of education for social workers. And there is a requirement for GPA, and we invited you into the membership, and then you can attain excellence in scholarship and achievement in social work. Right now, the National Phi Alpha has a couple committee, and we're working on very diligently try to have a global presence. So we have a global committee. We're part of the Council of Social Education annual program meeting. We're also part of the Social Work Distance Education Conference, and then also student organization. And we have planned and vision to really increase our presence internationally, creating chapter in different countries for their social work program. The other committee is the student committee. I think we recognize student leaders, and they are continuing being a lifelong learner and members. It's really important for us to really, reach out and really creating more service learning opportunity around social, economic, and environmental issues. So we welcome any member to join our Phi Alpha. or develop a new chapter within your school of social work. So we look forward to really share with you more scholarship opportunity and then presentations and also, any service learning opportunity. So with that being said, I'm gonna turn it over to our research liaison to continue our presentation.
Thank you, Professor, for that great overview of our organization. We really appreciate it. For our next professional organization, we have D.D. Hirsch Mental Health Services, and this will be in the form of a video.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nathan Lichtman. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the Training and Volunteer Coordinator for the D.D. Hirsch Suicide Prevention Center. I am so glad that I've had the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to be there live, but I was asked to send in this video, and I'm really glad to be with you. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about our center and how it got started. In 1953, these two psychiatrists, Doctors Farborough and Schneidman, began studying suicidology, which is the research topic dedicated to suicide prevention. And they began seeing this concept keep coming up in suicide notes that they were looking at the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office. And that concept was ambivalence, meaning that people weren't 100% sure that they wanted to die by suicide when they did die. And that led them to think, we need to create an intervention to come in this point of ambivalence to make it so that we could prevent suicide. And in 1958, they launched the nation's first suicide prevention center. And at the time, it was just this little research institution for let's figure out the way to come in at that point of ambivalence. In 1962, they were called upon as the experts worldwide to do a psychological autopsy on Marilyn Monroe. And they deemed her death to be a probable suicide. As you can imagine, that went out across major media outlets all across the country, and they started receiving a flood of calls from people all over, not just saying, I want to hear more about your research, but also saying, I feel that way too. I feel suicidal. And that led them to think, well, if we had a hotline, people could call in and tell us when they're feeling suicidal, and we'd be able to use this intervention and appeal to their ambivalence, and maybe we could keep them from dying by suicide. So the very next year, 1963, they opened the first 24-hour suicide hotline anywhere in the country. And so that's part of the amazing lineage that we have at D.D. Hirsch. And now we're part of the nationwide 988 network, which means that anywhere in the country, anyone can simply call, chat, or text 988, 3-digit number, for crisis and suicide intervention, which is just incredible. And last year, as a matter of fact, we actually answered over 150,000 calls, chats, and texts. So it's really amazing what we've been doing. How I got involved, I actually never thought I would be involved in something like this. I started out my career working in politics and political media, and especially around 2016, I stopped liking it as much. And meanwhile, a high school friend of mine, a very close friend in high school, when we had gone to separate colleges in our freshman year, had died by suicide, unfortunately. And he addressed part of his suicide note to me. And so in the background, I had always thought to myself, I want to do something to prevent suicide. And when I started feeling mixed about my career, it really came up for me, what if I volunteered? And oh boy, I mean, I loved my volunteering so much more than my job, so much more than my career. So I looked for ways to become more involved, and the rest, as they say, is history. How can you become involved? We operate on volunteers. Like, we would not be able to answer the calls, chats, and texts that we do without our amazing volunteers. If working directly for a crisis line appeals to you, this is not the volunteership where you're going to grab coffee for people or make copies. This is you talking to people in crisis. If that appeals to you, I would really encourage you to go to our website, which is didihirsch.org, DIDIHIRSCH.org. Check out the Get Involved tab and look at the volunteership and look at what we're, asking for. It's 4 hours a week. We work with you to schedule it, and it would just be amazing to have you. So thank you once again for letting me talk today, and I wish you all the best of luck.
And for our final professional organization of today's symposium, we have our very own Ms. Davishka. She is the representative for California Society for Clinical Social Work. Everyone, please welcome Davishka.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's event. Today, I'm going to talk about a really unique organization called California Society for Clinical Social Work. I have put a flyer in the chat if anyone is interested in joining after the presentation. So the California Society for Clinical Social Work mission is to advance and promote the profession and practice of clinical social work. It's the only organization in California that focuses on the interests of clinical social workers and the clients that they serve. We focus on education, legislative, and regulatory advocacy. There's great opportunity for networking, and you can also promote the practice and profession of social work, as well as develop professionally. Our goals is to advocate for members in the profession before the legislature and relevant regulatory agencies, to provide educational opportunities and training and information that meets our members' needs. We also work to increase recognition of the value of practitioners and the profession among allied professionals in the healthcare industry and the public. And we also mentor individuals entering the profession as well. So a few member benefits of joining California Society of Clinical Social Work. It's a wonderful experience for professional development. It's a great opportunity for networking and connection to the community of social work. And it provides a really great experience for ongoing advocacy for the profession. So within the professional development, there's really great benefits such as free CEUs, which we all know that we need as social workers. There's workshops that you can attend, including those required by the Board of Behavioral Science, such as law and ethics. And there's also a free consultation opportunity that you can have if you have any consultation issues that you need to address. We have a wonderful program called the Student Ambassador Program. So this is a program where students can be the official representative of the California Society of Social Work at your enrolled School of Social Work. And it's to promote the membership of the organization and help engage in networking opportunities through the representation of the organization and your school when meeting with other organizations such as the Board of Behavioral Science, as well as the National Social Worker Association. And it's a great thing to also add on your resume. Benefits, you can receive a sash for your graduation. And you can also receive admission to a lot of events that occur. One event that's occurring, that's upcoming is the Lobby Days, which we are attending as well. So the California Society of Clinical Social Work offers resources for students and ASWs, such as mentorship program. You can seek guidance regarding continuing education and opportunities, as well as career development. We have a BBS liaison who facilitates communication between members and the Board of Behavioral Science. We have a wonderful support group for our social working students. And also we have a supervisor's list. So you can go on there and find a supervisor. We can also connect with our community through our listserv. We have a therapist finder where you can list for members to seek referrals. So if you're interested in getting involved, we have a state board that you can join. We have committees such as an advocacy committee, a communications committee, education, membership, and diversity and equity transformation as well. So I encourage everyone to join the California Society of Clinical Social Work. Please take a look at the flyer that's in the chat to become a member. Thank you.
And for our next presenter, we're going to move on into continuing the research for today. Just as a friendly reminder, we are going to put time reminders in the chat. But for the next one, we have Miss Rebecca Fox-Starr. Rebecca Fox-Starr is a mental health author and advocate focused on improving maternal mental health care, quality, equity, and access. After suffering from severe postpartum depression after the birth of her second child in 2013, Becca shared her story in real time in an effort to help other sufferers. She created a blog and support group that reached all 50 states and 160 countries across the world, and subsequently wrote 2 academic books on maternal mental health. More recently, Becca wrote a children's book aimed at normalizing mental health issues and negative emotions for kids and their parents. In 2021, Becca wanted to be more active in improving maternal mental health care, and along with her 2 best friends, created EVER, which stands for Empowerment via Evaluation of Risk, which is the topic she will be presenting on today. She and her partners use technology and machine learning in order to improve depression screenings by making them more comprehensive and accessible. Most recently, Rebecca started her journey as an MSW student here at USC and hopes to be able to bring clinical expertise to her cause. She lives outside of Philadelphia with her husband, daughter, son, and 2 goofy dogs. Everyone, please welcome Ms. Rebecca Fox-Starr.
Thank you so much for having me here today. It is truly an honor, and I definitely did not think that I would be here. So I really appreciate, and I'm going to share my screen with you. So here I'm going to talk about that. The introduction was obviously very comprehensive. So I am here today as an MSW student, and I am here today as a survivor of severe postpartum depression. In 2013, after the birth of my second child, my son, I experienced severe postpartum depression, as I said, and I'll show you. I'm one of the lucky ones. That's what I always say. When I was in the hospital, I had access to care. I had insurance to pay for it. I didn't have to worry about doctors listening to me or believing me. And I was given a paper screening here. This is the EPDS. I was given a copy of the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale on a clipboard, filled it out with my pencil. I can remember erasing and refilling in some bubbles, and subsequently got a very high score on my EPDS, indicating I was at risk for postpartum depression. And I even endorsed the self-harm question because I had been considering self-harm in that moment. And unfortunately, instead of that causing some kind of alert or going to my OB, it ended up in a file somewhere never to be seen again. But because, as I said, I feel like truly one of the fortunate ones, I had a supportive network, husband, parents, family. They saw that something was wrong. I had the education to seek help, the access, the insurance, and I slowly started to heal. In 2014, in February of 2014, when I was 4 months postpartum, I decided to use that aforementioned mom blog that I had started in 2010, when I assure you mom blogs were very different than they are now, and open up in real time about my journey. And I realized that sharing for me And engaging in that camaraderie of sufferers was therapeutic for me, though it was scary. I can tell you that as professionals from a patient side of things, I was terrified to come out with the fact that I was suffering from postpartum depression in that moment. I thought, when I say these words, I'm going to be forever labeled as a mentally ill person. Maybe I'll be stigmatized. Maybe parents won't want their kids to come to my house to play because I'm mentally ill. But I truly, in that moment, said to myself, if I can help one person by sharing my story, if I can help one person to feel less alone, then it would be worth it. And I was extremely fortunate that it panned out that way. And as the bio said, I wrote 2 books on maternal mental health and perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. I decided, you know what, I'm in a really good position. I love to write, I love to connect. I'm going to learn about these disorders, and I'm going to share my story, but also some actionable advice and clinical information, but as like just a patient, just a regular young woman. And so in the summer of 2021, I became aware of more and more mental health crises that were hitting close to home, that were so shocking to me that I was saying, how is this happening that nobody's saying this person had a traumatic birth experience? They're going to be at risk for postpartum depression, but no one flags them. So I did what a lot of people do. I talked to my friends about it. And I said, sorry about that. I said to one of my friends who's a technologist, why is it that when I go on Amazon, they can say, you're going to like this shirt, and you looked at this shirt? Oh, then you should look at this shirt. And why is it that I can go on a dating site and click, I like this is important to me, this is not important to me, and an answer pops out of who I'm going to be compatible with. And yet, when it comes to identifying, predicting, detecting mental health issues, it doesn't exist. So we got very excited. He got excited on a technology side of things and started teaching me about machine learning. And we applied for the PRAMS data from the NIH and CDC, and we got all of this information from the government about the different features that birthing people were filling out. And we started to see patterns in risk. So we got very excited and turned to our other friend who was a clinical psychologist. And we said, we're going to come up with the best risk assessor. And she said, so kindly, right, but who are you to come up with a tool? You need to work with the validated tools. So that's what we did. We decided we're going to walk before we can run. And I'm going to take a second to show you what we've come up with. Oh, sorry, I just wanted to make sure our time was okay. I created, as I said, this program called EVER. My books had the word EVER in the titles, but to me, it stands for Empowerment via Evaluation of Risk. I wanted to be able to screen more birthing people with more efficiency. I wanted to make it worthwhile for the practitioners and clinicians to screen their clients and patients. These are detectable, predictable, and treatable illnesses. So we began to simply digitize the existing screenings. And I'm going to show you an example. So here is this EVER portal that I have here. And I am going to show you how quickly and easily somebody can engage in this to make it worth their while to screen clients. So here I'm going to show you an adaptive PHQ-2, which if I had more time, I would explain why we created this adaptive PHQ-2. But I'm going to send it to myself here at Foxstar at usc.edu. Quick and easy. And I know I'm going to be emphasizing that, but I really want to show you how we can make screening accessible and desirable in an easy, approachable way. So there's disclosure. So I'm going to show you here. Now, one of the things that I'm learning about right now in my classes is looking at things through a cultural lens, looking at behavioral factors when you're giving somebody a screening or a survey, how important it is to screen with these assessment tools, but also read their body language and look at them. And my teacher just told me on Thursday, my professor said, I don't know if you're going to have time to screen your clients. You need to build in this time into your sessions. And it's hard to capture a true and honest assessment and evaluation when you have a limited amount of time and a lot of paperwork. So here we built in as many things as we could to make this as efficient and effective as possible. So I'm just going to show you a very short version of the survey. And so as you see here, I completed this screening survey. And one of the things that I didn't get to mention, oh, this is being very slow right now. I'm sorry, this is not going to show such a wonderful result here. I left my name out of it. I made it blank, and that is why that it did that. But I'm just going to show you, if a client endorses a harm score like I did when I was in the hospital after having my son, the clinician or practitioner receives an instant text message, email, and alert on their portal here, where you can see that it's red. It's saying you need to be attentive. And my friends and I created this. We started to pilot it. It's still just in the pilot stages. We're trying to see how can we get more people to use this? Can we get more data to try to figure out how can we better help these people, women, birthing people, their partners. In the first week of our first pilot, a patient in an OBGYN office did endorse that she was thinking about self-harm. That adaptive PHQ-2 that I showed you there was, if you get a certain score, the PHQ-2 opens up and becomes a PHQ-9. And so you have all those questions. You don't have to rewrite or re-ask those other questions. And because our PHQ-2 adapted into a PHQ-9, this patient at the OBGYN's office was given that harm question. She endorsed this, said she had been contemplating self-harm. And then I thought, whatever else I do my entire career, it's worth it. As we began to develop this and test it more, I realized that there was only so much I could do as this non-clinical person with very limited expertise. And that's why I decided to come here to USC and, okay, 5 minutes left to learn. I wanted to be able to bring a certain amount of clinical expertise. I wanted to answer the question, well, what do we do? We're screening these clients, we're screening these people, and then what do we do with them? I will tell you that you may have seen in my slide before, women who are non-white are 3 times as likely to die during and after giving birth. 40% more likely to be diagnosed with a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. That is unacceptable, horrifying, and needs to be changed. We need to increase access, we need to increase screening, we need to increase education. And what I've learned in my early stages of research is that even saying to somebody, we're going to screen you, that already makes a difference. Saying, I see you, that makes a difference. Just alerting someone that there is this issue that they're being, monitored for or even screened for, that makes a difference. So here I'm going to show you what I was talking about how when you don't get to see somebody or talk to them and you can't really read their body language, you can't get as comprehensive of an answer. That's what we tried to build in here. Here you see if the answer was ever changed. So because I had to redo the survey, you're not going to see the example here, but the yellow shows that I picked one answer and that didn't impact my score at all. What happens if you do a, show you if I can show you actually an older survey. Maybe this one will be a better example to show you. So if you see an older survey, you can see, this is a better example, sorry about that. The answers have been changed. So as a clinician, I can see that very quickly, that my patient here changed the answer. Maybe she decreased the score. Is she trying to hide something? How is she really feeling? And you get a better indication based on their behavior of how they perhaps are really truly feeling. And then you saw on the screen before, you can monitor trends. So you can see this person scored a 6 this week. 6 isn't so alarming, but she was at a 2 last week. So what do we make of that? So in any case, all of these features are to try to make a more comprehensive, accessible, equitable screening program so that we can access and help more people. Because as I said, I will bookend this presentation with the same thing that I started with. I am so lucky to be here today. I'm so lucky to be in this position, to have had the support that I've had. So I just very much want to give back. And I'm so inspired by my colleagues who did present before me today and the incredible research and work that's being done. And so I would actually love the opportunity to be able to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I would really, really love the opportunity to be able to engage in more research, to contribute to the field of social work and mental health in a more meaningful way. And so if anyone is interested in learning more about screening or learning more about maternal mental health, or would just like to talk or has research opportunities for me, my email address is foxstar, FOXSTARR @usc.edu. I see that there's a question.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story with us and being so vulnerable. And it was so interesting to hear about your research. We do have one question. How are you convincing healthcare providers to utilize your assessment scales?
So great question. This is what I need to learn more about. That's why I'm here as a student at USC. But the reason why I am very confident that it's going to be desirable is, to be frank, it increases revenue, it improves outcomes, and that's money. And so if you can get reimbursed for a lot of these screenings. And if someone does not have insurance, you are improving the outcomes so greatly that you're reducing emergency room visits, you're reducing readmission. And if you're looking at things from a purely cynical perspective, that is how I hope to entice clinicians. But on a personal human-to-human level, I'm hoping that saying, we're making this easy for you. You don't have to be swamped in paperwork. We know you're busy. We know time is money. We know how exhausted you are. Here, you can text a client a survey. In 30 seconds, they can finish it. You can get an alert to your phone. That's the best that I can do. I think that trying to make it as easy and profitable in all ways, I hope that practitioners can think of it as doing well while doing good.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for presenting today and sharing all that great information. We will also include your contact information in the post email that we will send out to everybody. I don't see any more questions. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
And for our next presenter, we have Ms. Mercedes. She is a licensed clinical social worker and DSW candidate at USC. She is currently working on her capstone project addressing the mental health outcomes of African American youth. You can learn more about her and her work at shameproofing.com. Everyone, please welcome Ms. Mercedes. You are muted.
Hello. Yes. Now, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I am Mercedes Smudio. I am so excited to be here. Let me get myself together here. Right. That, and let me just give you this. I hope that works here. Share. Can you all see that? Yes? Awesome. And so I'm going to move myself here. I don't need to see me. And so today I'm going to be talking a little bit about not just, hello?
Mercedes, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm not sure if it's just me, but I can't see the full presentation.
Okay. All right.
It's kind of.
Let me try again.
There you go.
How is
Thank
that? Perfect. Thank you. Move myself over here. Awesome. So we'll be talking a little bit about my research as well as my capstone project in my DSW program, which is Engaging Black Families. It is a 3-day training program that is for mental health clinicians who are working with African-American families. And so today I hope to present that training to you just kind of as something to think about. It's something that I'm hoping to launch within the next couple of months in May. And I just kind of want to share a little bit more about why this program is so needed and why I think training mental health clinicians, as we've actually heard a little bit today, is so important to maintaining the mental health outcomes of our families and our youth. And so the problem that I'm addressing is that African-American children experience negative and adverse mental health outcomes and are at risk for long-term health issues due to racism. If you look at just the mental health facts, about 16% of those who identify as Black or African-American experienced a mental health issue over the past year. From that space, you can look at African-American children and see that they're more likelier to attempt suicide than their white counterparts, about 10% to 6% respectively. The suicide rate for African-American children has also gone from the 10th leading cause of death to the 10th leading cause of death for this population within the past 20 years. And depression and other symptoms like depression have increased in this population at least 10%. In looking at these issues that has increased with African-American youth, I wanted to explore within my literature review and within even my initial preliminary data research with surveys, what was going on here. What I found in the literature is that racism and discrimination tends to be one of the main issues that becomes a barrier for African-American youth and their families in addressing and managing mental health symptoms. There are about 5% more likely to experience poor health outcomes when exposed to racial discrimination. 70% of these African-American families reported being mistreated by healthcare providers, with at least, like I said, 10% of these children being sharing that they've experienced racism or racial discrimination. On top of that, when families do access services, there's also issues around family and social barriers. Within my own preliminary data, while I looked at surveying mental health providers and their ability to support African-American families, as well as African-American parents and their ideas around accessing care, what I found from parents is that they're not always aware of their child's own mental health. And that was a huge barrier, again, not only to accessing, but even to know when to access their care. When we look specifically, however, at a specific demographic, which is for my research, African-American youth preteens, which are 9 to 12 years old, they begin to decrease their use and treatment around this age. This is also the age where they begin to engage in behaviors that will increase their mental health symptoms, whatever that looks like. They become more secretive about their lives. They also want to be a part of their decision-making process with treatment, which oftentimes they're not. And they also face a lot of discrimination because children at this age are beginning to get into that school to prison pipeline, especially for African-American youth. So what does all that mean and why does it matter? Well, the big picture here is that issues such as racial disparities, ignoring the influence of racial and family barriers in community, as well as even the lack of policy specifically addressing this population, helps us to really understand how this problem became so wicked in the first place. Also looking at the lack of targeted interventions, policy initiatives, and theoretical understanding kind of shows us that we've been ignoring this in the past, and it's important to bring more awareness to this issue, hence my research. Especially as we're looking at the fact that African-American children rather, are going to be accessing services and seeking mental health services. And so it begs the question, if these statistics are showing that there are these huge barriers that are coming about because of racism and discrimination, how can we mitigate that so that way when these families come into mental health services, our clinicians are prepared to manage their own racial bias as well as the racial issues that our clients are bringing in? However, I'm not the first person to think about this. There are a lot of interventions out there that have kind of hemmed and hawed on how to manage this. Right now, what I'm seeing and what I'm going to present to you are some of the interventions that actually have done a really good job at trying to address all of the components. Whether they do that or not is kind of what I'll address. So Bridging the Gap is talking a little bit about when we bring parents into the fold of African-American preteens mental health treatment, they feel a little bit better about actually making decisions about their child's health care. They feel like they can get more information about healthcare and mental health. And we realize that there's a lot of positive outcomes for children when community and family supports are included in treatment. Breland Noble, who actually is quite a name out in the world for African-American mental health, came up with a motivational interviewing intervention that really talked about how to actually engage depressed African-American preteens in treatment. And so in her study, she was looking at why aren't families seeking treatment? And one of the barriers that she found was that when you're engaging this population, you need to not just do the therapy things, but you also need to engage their community and engage how they see using the community as long-term supports. Something else she found is that preteens really like innovative techniques. And so they don't really like to work with clinicians who are using maybe outdated talk therapy things or things that aren't really going to address what they're bringing to therapy. Another thing that I thought was interesting in my research as we're looking at different interventions that have tried to address African-American youth mental health is mindfulness and intersectionality. And so in one study, the authors developed an implicit bias test. And they actually found that clinicians with anti-Black pro-white biases could really benefit from training on managing their biases. They actually, if you've ever heard of the implicit bias test, if you have not, I encourage you to look it up. I think it was the Harvard school that did that, but this study created their own based on that research that specifically addresses clinicians and mental health care bias. And then another set of authors looked at mindfulness and using mindfulness to manage bias within a clinician or client relationship. And what they talked about is a self-compassion technique that encourages both practitioners and African-American families to reflect on their assumptions about Blackness and how that can be a huge moment for that therapeutic relationship to really uncover some things that might become barriers to mental health treatments, such as racism and racial discrimination. And then lastly, there's been this assessment of racial trauma tool that Williams and her authors found, talking about, and it's a whole clinical training that clinicians can do that really talks about how to address post-traumatic stress disorder in clients in terms of looking at race-based traumatic experiences. And so within the training, clinicians are trained on how to identify these experiences, as well as when to use assessment tools and when to treat race-based trauma and PTSD in people of color. And so if you look here, all of the research that I've found pretty much shows that there's a huge need to really address racial discrimination and racism within the mental health field, especially as it looks at African-American preteens who, as I've shared, are already kind of at the precipice of pulling away from their mental and emotional wellness. They're in a societal space where mental health is still a stigma. And within African-American cultures, mental health can be a really huge stigmatizing issue. And so at this space here, we're looking at interventions that are trying to pull in family, that are trying to pull in community as a way to maybe bolster our African-American preteens' mental health symptoms so they're not dealing with all of this alone. And so if we're looking at the future of African-American mental health, we're looking at bringing more awareness, like I said, to racial and cultural determinants. We're looking at addressing bias and discrimination in the mental health field and really challenging some of the Eurocentric interventions that have been used prior to treat everyone, and trying to bring more awareness to the idea that unique populations have unique issues that might become barriers or strengths to how they might go through or traverse treatment. There's also limited awareness of how to integral religion, community, and extended family are to the overall well-being of the African-American family. And I think this is about training, hence why I am proposing a clinical training. Learning how to manage all of that is a social work component. However, I don't think it's solely relegated to social work. I think we can definitely train other professionals, not just mental health professionals, but hopefully even other auxiliary professionals, parent partners, case managers, to really understand the importance of religion, spirituality, community, and extended family in overall treatment planning for African American families. Also, and this is just something where we're looking at gaps here, the lack of research acknowledging how African-American children's mental health can translate into policies is something that I noticed in the literature is really lacking as well. So not only are we not looking specifically at African-American youth's mental health issues as a whole, we're not even looking at how we can enact policies to ensure that agencies and organizations have the funding to actually address this concern. And so if you're looking for research and gaps or gap in research, look at how policies can be used. I think someone mentioned earlier that lobby days is coming up, and it's a really good way to start understanding how does the legislative process factor into some of the funding and some of the interventions that are given to organizations and agencies. So that's a huge gap there that my research can't cover. But if you're someone who's like, where can I help and where can I jump in? That's a really good space to jump in. So if we're moving forward on kind of how my project and how my capstone is going to address this, I'm looking at what can we be doing now to address some of these concerns in terms of racial discrimination and racism within that therapeutic relationship between African-American youth and clinical mental health providers. And so if we're looking at this social justice design thinking kind of solution, we're looking at all the criteria that the literature and my preliminary research has shown us, that we really do need to be aware of implicit bias. We really need to be aware of the dynamic between African-American parents and mental health professionals. There's a lot of allyship that actually needs to happen with African-American families, as I think many African-American families that step into the mental health field are met with a lot of stigma and a lot of stereotypes that, again, a training could really address. And I also think that mindfulness is really important when we're managing trauma. A lot has been said about racism and how pervasive it is, and how for many African-American families, it's really difficult to mitigate the effects of racism while still living in it. And so the training will incorporate mindfulness for families, not in terms of this self-care, go to the spa, but this idea, as I even mentioned in some of the literature, about really exploring our Blackness, really exploring how, even if we're not always acutely aware of it, how it does influence our mental and emotional awareness. And I think if a clinician can bring that into the therapeutic relationship, it can even help bolster a lot of times how to mitigate racism that's always ongoing. And so based on that criteria, this social justice thinking here is a clinical training for mental health professionals. And so I'll dive a little bit into what the basis of this training looks like. And so I'm going to be theoretically looking at intersectionality as I'm exploring African-American preteens at the intersection of race and age. And I'm also looking at the trans-theoretical model, which some of us know as the states of change model. I'm looking at how do we explore how African-American preteens and their families actually move through change as a result to this racial discrimination and racism. And so through intersectionality and the states of change, I've developed this 3-day training for professionals to really help them understand, how do I specifically and uniquely move African-American families through change in a way that's going to increase the mental health wellness of African-American teens and decrease their mental health symptoms, specifically kind of looking, like I said, at that preteen demographic. To come to this space, like I said earlier, I did an extensive literature review, really looking at the just extensive citations of racial discrimination in healthcare and in mental health care. My literature review also showed that there's really this lack of clinical understanding of what truly supports the long-term healthy outcomes of African-American families. And also, like I said in my preliminary research, I offered surveys to mental health professionals who were currently working in community mental health, as well as to African-American families who had preteens who had either accessed or were currently accessing mental health care. And so from these criteria and these methods, I was able to kind of come up with the design criteria that you just saw me talk about. And so when we look at kind of what this 3-day training is, we are really looking at training for mental health clinicians that will develop their skills to support African-American families' mental and emotional well-being. Again, at 9 to 12, even though the intended beneficiary is the African-American preteen, we know that African-American parents are kind of the head of the family. And so if we are ignoring them and bypassing them just to get to the preteen, we're ignoring exactly what literature is showing us that we're ignoring, how important community and family is to the overall well-being of African-American preteens. And so in the training, we're going to be talking about how do you manage that? Even if you're doing individual work with the preteen, how do you manage that therapeutic relationship with these auxiliary supports to actually create a treatment plan that's going to support long-term change in this particular client? We'll also be diving into our own racial biases, really looking at what does that look like? What am I stepping into the session with when I'm working with African-American families? And again, in a non-judgmental way, in a way that you can learn how to address it. So that way you can be continuously working on it as you're managing children and as you're managing what's going on with them. So let me just kind of wrap up here. Thank you. I was not paying attention to the chat, but I am now. So I'm definitely at the end here. But pretty much what I wanted to share is that over the course of 3 days, the clinicians will be immersed in understanding the historical nature of mental health care for African-American families. They're also going to be learning about techniques on assessment and connection. As I've said, the therapeutic relationship, as we've seen in the literature and in my preliminary surveys, is very important. And so we'll be talking about that. And then day 3, we'll be talking about how to develop treatment plans and exploring case studies so participants can actually practice a lot of what they've learned. Here are my references, yay, quite a bit of them. And then also here are ways to connect with me. So I'm on Instagram and Twitter. My email is here. Here's actually the link for the training if you're interested in learning more about it and connecting. And then here's my website. It's just kind of a quick website that shows a little bit more about some of the things that I'm doing, and you can connect with me there. And I'm actually gonna put, if I can, the file in the chat. I don't know if everyone can see, but I will do it. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mercedes. Would you be able to share, I think it was, oh, never mind. I think it was shared to everybody, but we will also go ahead and send it to via email as well. Lauren, are there any questions in the chat?
There are no questions in the chat, but I did have just one question. So the training is going live now, and like how often are you offering it?
So I am hoping to have the training ready for May, or actually no, for June. So on the site on my slides, it'll actually have the updated. So I think right now I'm trying to shoot for June 2nd to June 4th that weekend. So yes, technically it is live to be able to register and connect that way, yes.
Great, thank you so much, Mercedes. We enjoyed your presentation. Bye. And then our next presenter for today, we have Ami Lind. She is a Master of Social Work student in the clinical specialization at Azusa Pacific University in the Advanced Standing Program. Her research topic is high school staff's perceived knowledge and comfortability with mandated reporting, as she is currently interning at Pasadena High School. This study was inspired by observing a staff meeting and hearing teachers explain that they do not have the time or the motivation to initiate a suspected child abuse report. That being said, everyone, please welcome Ami Lind.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Lind, as mentioned, and this is my research project that I was able to do. Before starting, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I'm very honored to be joining this morning with Phi Alpha. But yeah, I had an opportunity to conduct this research project for my capstone in my advanced standing program here for my MSW. And this topic was picked as I had observed a staff meeting that is hosted weekly. And I heard some teachers talk about just the lack of comfortability with mandated reporting. And that kind of raised a concern as, they're not therapists, they're not mental health professionals. So I just kind of want to investigate more as to see what could be the potential barriers in regards to reporting suspected child abuse. As well as me and one other social worker is at the school, and there's one psychologist, and this is a school comprised of around 1,700 students. And we all know that everyone within the school system has the legal obligation to report child abuse. So this is how this topic came about. So starting off, just a little bit of introduction as to what child abuse entails. This act was enacted in 1974, CAMRA, for mandated reporting as identifying any forms of child abuse or neglect. The legal and the objective mandated reporting was to raise awareness and increase the number of child abuse cases as legislation is implemented that requires professionals from different practices. So we can see this specifically within the school system, and to increase social awareness and just encouragement to report among individuals. A little bit into the literature, as teachers are interacting with students for most of the day, nearly half of their waking hours, they're forced with having to make a quick decision about these stories that they've been heard or things that they've observed from students and their peers that could potentially harm themselves, or they're getting harmed by others, as well as parents too. Reporting child abuse and neglect as child protection services can be a very heavy and time-consuming process that teachers may lack or not have been prepared for. And as we know, if there's no education or no additional information, this could be quite scary for people who haven't had to do it before. And so that it could be a stressful challenge for not only teachers, but staff and counselors due to the collaboration with other agencies, uncertainty, and the lack of training within an academic setting. So the method to the study, this was a one-shot case study. It had a little bit of quantitative, a little bit of qualitative, wouldn't necessarily call it a mixed methods, but I had distributed a survey via Google Forms during one of the staff meetings. And it consisted of 10 questions and 2 of them were open-ended. There was about 40 to 50 teachers there that day, but I had only got 16 responses. So this was a non-probability convenience sample that was gathered from teachers, which comprised of 68.6%, from staff 12.6%, and then mental health staff 18.8%, as I mentioned earlier, from Pasadena High School. There was 56.3 female participants and 43.8 male participants. Going back to the survey, I had asked 4 demographic questions that focused on occupation, duration, gender, and the grades that they had taught. And duration had ranged from less than a year, 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, 10 to 15 years, and 15+ years. I had used 4 Likert scale questions about their knowledge, confidence, and comfortability, and as well bias. And this bias question was asking if they think bias could be a potential factor when initiating a child abuse report, as research had showed that bias could be a barrier when initiating a report due to the lack of awareness of their circumstance. So these had rated from not at all confident to extremely confident. And then the 2 open-ended questions that I had asked were focused on their experience with initiating a child abuse report and possible recommendations that they would see fit for educators or just people and personnel on campus. As far as data analysis, SPS was used, and I had run 2 independent t-tests for the quantitative data side to test for the significance. My dependent variables were knowledge, comfortability, and confidence, and my independent variables were occupation, duration, their grades taught, and their gender. And then I had used thematic coding to identify common themes or trends among the open-ended questions. So these are some of the results. This first graph here focuses on, it's comprised of teachers, staff, and mental health staff together. So we can see that as for knowledge, a lot of them say that they're quite confident. That's definitely one of the highest. Even confidence in training is pretty high. But then we start to see when we look at comfortability, that's kind of medium, average, close to more below average. These are the responses for if bias is a factor for initiating a child abuse report. There's definitely kind of a half and half. I think educators were more surprised to be hearing this question because they maybe have never thought about it before. So we see that we have no, not sure, and then we have some saying yes, and then one maybe. These are the percentages of how many people have initiated a report versus not. So we see that 62.5 has and 37.5 personnel have not. These are some of the responses that came from the open-ended questions when asked if they've ever initiated a child abuse report. Teachers and staff had said physical abuse, neglect of psychosocial emotional needs. We had one staff that had said that they had consulted with DCFS, not necessarily initiated a report, but had called to get a consultation, and apparently something that had happened in class. When asked about additional information that could be helpful, some of the people had responded of making me like a checklist about the different people on campus that they could consult with. And I think this is very important, as I think a lot of people don't know that they can call DCFS and do a consultation or trying to get a second opinion. So I think that would be something very helpful. Some people actually mentioned that implicit bias training as well as a trauma-informed care training for demonstrating empathy, which would be helpful, and how that translates into the classroom and how can they take this information and make it relatable so they're ensuring the safety of the students, as well as just clarity about when to report, what not to report, and the different warning signs that they can identify, whether that be verbal, physical, just all the different factors that they can try to identify to see if there is a student at risk. On the right side here, this is to the t-test that I had run in regards to confidence. As we see, it's close to significant. There's not necessarily a huge impact as far as significantly speaking. So that was something that came back interesting. As we see, there's not necessarily a huge contributing factor when it comes to measuring duration of occupation or gender or bias. So the other variables did not come back as close as significant. As far as discussion, we see that more than half of the participants feel pretty confident about their knowledge in mandated reporting, but nearly half of the participants do not feel comfortable initiating a child abuse report due to the training they have received. This is something that, at least at my high school, educators are probably brushed up on mandated reporting, maybe once every year, every few years. And when you don't necessarily have to do something, you kind of lose that information and that drive. So I think that being said, this was also interesting because according to the results, that there's a general average of mandated reports between teachers and mental health staff. And so there's actually around the same amount from the data collected. Findings reveal that implicit bias could potentially be a factor when initiating a child abuse report. This would be something to further dive into to see what could be the potential challenges in regards to biases that these educators may have. And they could benefit from an implicit bias training, basically how their perceptions of race or socioeconomic status and even possibly housing status could be a contributing factor when initiating a report. And then findings also should suggest that it'd be valuable to have a list of personnel to consult with when suspected child abuse occurs. And they may benefit from having some sort of resource to refer to when there is some sort of suspicion, whether that be people on campus or some organizations, some agencies, some numbers, whatever that may look like, to have that reassurance when they need to report. As educating is important, and that is the first step. I think teaching and demonstrating to others about what this process may look like so that they're informed and would contribute to the bigger picture by starting with the educators to ensure these student safety. some of the limitations based on the small sample size of educators that completed the survey. This was limiting generalizability, and also, as we know, surveys often lack depth and detailed feedback. As far as further research, it would be effective to explore the trainings that they've already been receiving and how effective they are and how they play out into the actual reports, as well as exploring the biases when initiating a report and how to dismantle them for the child safety, as well as annually assessing the knowledge and comfortability of teachers and staff. Society and school culture is always changing. And I think doing something like this or similar to this of getting comfortable with what the educators are feeling, as this is probably something that's not, at least what I've observed, not talked about as much. And so this would be so important to go really into depth and keep it consistent to make sure that everyone is on the same page at my high school. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ami. Do we have any questions in the chat, Lauren?
No, we don't have any questions, but I was just curious on what got you interested in this topic.
Yeah, so as I had attended a staff meeting, I heard a lot of teachers just say that they weren't very motivated as they already have a lot on their plate. And coming from a social worker's perspective, that was kind of very concerning to hear. Just really seeing not only how teachers are treated, but also students are treated. And as someone who works individually with students, I was just hearing a lot of needs and a lot of things that were happening among the school, and looking at it as a systematic problem. I think it would be really important to dive into the admin, the organization, all the different personnel within it, so we can try to identify where this issue started and how we can tackle it. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And as hearing you explain, I think learning what is the root or the cause of what their views are, not having enough time and possibly feeling overwhelmed is really important. So thank you for sharing that. And this is really important as social workers too, because we are mandated reporters and school staff are mandated reporters as well. And to see what exactly is getting in the way of that is one of the roles, so we can ensure that the students are safe in the schools that we attend. So we really appreciate you presenting. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for our next presenter, we have Terry Ann Scott. Terry Ann Scott is a doctoral candidate in the School of Social Work, focusing on closing the health gap by preventing and managing chronic illnesses like type 2 diabetes with health prevention programs. Terry Ann has spent over 25 years working in health and fitness as a health and wellness coach, aerobics instructor, personal trainer, and chronic disease and prevention specialist. Last year, with the encouragement of her program at USC, Terry Ann founded a nonprofit organization, Tact Health Solutions, which provides online weight loss and health prevention programs for individual at risk or with chronic illnesses. Terry is from Chicago, but lives in Kansas City and is the mom of 2 adult daughters. Everyone, please welcome Ms. Terry Ann Scott.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Let me start share my video. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with you because I know we've had a long day and it's been some great presentations. I got some more motivation and encouragement. So thank you guys, the presenters, so much great information. So let me, and 1 second, let me go ahead and get started. And where is, close that slideshow, play from start. All right, so this is my first time doing a storyboard. So it's like, what the heck? I always do PowerPoint presentations. So bear with me if it looks a little weird. Okay, so basically I'm here I'm with TAT, Health Solutions, so it's a nonprofit, but I'm with USC. It's a part of my capstone, and it just kind of got out of wow. It just kind of got out of control, right? So one of the things I started off with my capstone back in 2000 when I started the program is why revising a national diabetes prevention program can help increase the number of providers in Kansas City, Missouri. And then 6 reasons why they're not that effective, and a review of a proposed prototype. So just basically some things I've seen and have researched over the years that have kind of led me to like, well, it needs to be some changes done. So a little bit quick review about type 2 diabetes. I know we're all familiar with it. We probably know someone with it because 96 million Americans have prediabetes, and half of them have diabetes, type 2 diabetes. And actually, is it 70% of Americans have at least 2 chronic illnesses and 50% have 1. And that kind of prompted me to get into chronic disease prevention, because as an instructor, I just saw over the years that I went from seeing people coming to the gym because they wanted to come to people coming into the gym because they had to come. I worked 25 years at the YMCA. That's the only gym I've ever worked for. I worked on the floor. I was a wellness director. So I worked all over the gym, taught many classes. But again, the first 10 years, I started as a wellness coach, showing people how to use the machines, equipment, working out, exercising. And then the next 10 years, it's chronic disease prevention instructor. I'm doing arthritis. I'm doing diabetes prevention. I'm doing high blood pressure management. I'm doing arthritis. And the list goes on. And I'm actually, guys, certified in all that, really. And so I had to pick one. I can't do all the chronic illnesses. So I chose type 2 diabetes because I had some personal reasons. So first of all, we know we're going to call it's now T2D. So that's the new acronym for it, type 2 diabetes. So you'll start hearing that and seeing that a lot. And some of you might have clients that, like I said, a lot of people have this illness or at risk. So it's been considered the most critical health challenge since the 21st century. Actually, it's a worldwide problem. If you look all over the world, it's really an issue. 29 million people in the US have diabetes, and 8.1 million might be undiagnosed, and they're not even aware they have them. About 1.4 million cases are diagnosed every year. And that's why prevention is so important when going to the doctor and just getting those checks. It is really so important. And then having a referral process. The cost and the prevalence of type 2 diabetes, T2D, is just astronomical. The cost of $32 billion a year, including healthcare productivity. So out of that $32 billion, some of that is going to medical costs, a lot of that, and the other half is work productivity. I can't go to work. I got to go to dialysis. I'm not feeling well, just all kind of problems that can prevent people from being able to go to work. The reasons also I chose this topic, not only from working in the gym and just seeing how exercise was kind of like medicine. I had some personal reasons due to family history. I lost my father to diabetes 4 years ago, and I was his caregiver. And I took him to dialysis, and I watched him through all the struggles, ups and downs. And once I saw him take his last breath, I vowed, nobody has to ever struggle with this again. This is ridiculous. All right, so about the NDPP, short for National Diabetes Prevention Program, and there's also the Medicare Diabetes Prevention Program. You'd be surprised, a lot of people are not familiar with these programs, but it was created in 2010 to address the increasing burden of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes in the US. And this national effort created partnerships with all kinds of public and private organizations to offer this evidence-based, cost-effective intervention to help type 2 diabetes in communities throughout the US. One major key feature of the National DPP is that the CDC recognized lifestyle program is a research-based program focusing on healthy eating and physical activity. Both of those go together. So they got this saying, exercise is king, nutrition is queen. You put them together, you'll have a kingdom. Or you can vice versa if you want. You can say nutrition is king, I don't know. But regardless, they both need to be working together. So with this program, they found if they took a part of this program and made a structured lifestyle change program, it cut developing risk of type 2 diabetes by over 58%. And for people over 60 years old, it was even higher, 71%. Now, the Medicare, the MDPP, is also a part of the diabetes prevention program, but it's covered mainly by Medicare and Medicaid. So, but they do work together. So individuals that have Medicare and Medicaid, they would usually go under the MDPP, their insurance now covers this. Real quick story about this is that about when I started working with the Y, I was part of the pilot project of the, by then we were on grants. And I was teaching this program when it was just a pilot at the Y in Long Beach, California. And so shout out to, I think it's Sherry, she said she's from Long Beach. So I was teaching this class out there and I was just seeing like miracles happen, blood pressure go down, losing weight, just all kind of stuff. And so I was like, okay, this is really good, this works. Now, my personal, and just seeing for people over 71 years old, working with what I've seen, a lot of people are busy with kids. And I don't know, I think sometimes young people just don't really take it seriously because they got a couple more years to live. I don't know, but from running the program myself, I found the seniors tend to take it a little serious. Let's see. So who is affected by type 2 diabetes? It often affects people over 45. And it's seen, it's getting increasingly, you're seeing it in young adults and children. I live in Kansas City, Missouri, and I go to all kind of meetings with diabetes, and I'm part of a lot of different organizations, National Chronic Disease Directors and all this great stuff. And they were talking about now they have mobile units going to elementary schools because kids are getting diabetes now, to give them insulin and to give them, to test them to make sure they're on the right track, right? So that's kind of scary just to know that, and this has never been seen before. So even though diabetes normally affect people over 45, it's kind of seen all over. Another interesting fact about who's affected, when I go to health fairs and I promote this program, you'd be surprised, a lot of people over 45 and that are not physically active and that are overweight, they tend to, oh, well, I went and got my blood sugar tested, I'm fine. You're still at risk. They don't understand you're still at risk. As long as you're over your height or weight, you're at risk not only for diabetes, but for a lot of other chronic illnesses. So, but the best way to prevent diabetes is through pre-diabetes when you're first tested and find out you have it. I never really understand the current process, what you're trying to change. A person goes to the doctor says, you have pre-diabetes. The person says, okay. The doctor says, go exercise and eat right. The person goes, okay. The person walks out the office, go 2 months to a gym quick, go back to their ways. And now fast forward 3 years from now, the person goes back to the doctor says, you have diabetes. The person goes, oh no. And the doctor goes, oh, well, we have a diabetes management program for you. We have this, we have that. There was never really prevention. So this is fairly new. Again, I was with the when it was starting to be a pre-existing phase, when prevention was getting looked at. Everybody wanted to just take medications or promote medications. No one ever looked into prevention until the Obama care plan came, and that prevention part was in there. And now under President Biden, now he's pushing more towards diabetes prevention. So again, it is a serious pre-diabetes. It's also a serious health concern. And it's when a blood sugar level is higher. And 96 million people have this, and 1 in 3 of them don't even know they have it. 80% walking around like a time bomb. This is more commonly, unfortunately, in all people of color, mainly African American, Latino, Hispanic, even the Asian Americans have been following right behind on the footsteps of the Latino and African American culture. I highlighted African American because I work around that group a lot, and that's the group I decided to focus on the most because I have a lot of personal experience working with them. Okay, we'll go to the next one. All right, so on my capstone, you can't do everything. So I just started to focus on where am I living now in Missouri. So I did some research and I found out 1 in 3 adults in Kansas City in Missouri have overweight. Go Chiefs, but don't go for this obesity stuff. But yeah, they're overweight and have obese. That's a lot of people. And Kansas and Missouri were among the 8 states with increased rates of T2D, type 2 diabetes linked to obesity. So obesity and type 2 diabetes were like partnering. They were like getting it together, like really running things. So Missouri had a diabetes rate of 11.1%, and Kansas was right on their heels with 10.3%. They're like, I think, in the top 20 of the highest obese rates in the US. So now with all these numbers, with all this on state, you would think that they got hundreds and plethoras of programs. Not. When I signed up and started doing this program, I was the only provider last year. Now we have 2 in Kansas City, Missouri, and about 15 or 20, about 20 in St. Louis, Missouri. Yeah, so there's only 2 providers so far. All right, so with the history of the diabetes prevention, it cuts rates by 58%. And also, once everything was passed, they passed a bill where insurance companies pay for it. Medicare and Medicaid were the first two insurance providers to say, hey, this works. We're not going to keep paying for insulin. This don't make no sense. Hey, get these people in here. Well, the other insurance companies are still kind of, well, let's just see, right? YMCA, I was working with them they get so many evidence-based programs. It is ridiculous. They always come to us first, and I've ran probably all of them. But this is really a good one. So the YMCA was really partnering hard with the CDC, just running these programs. And again, in Congress in 1996 was like, okay, we're going to pay for it. This is what it's all about, and this is how we're going to do it. So who's affected by type 2 diabetes? We talked about that. This right here, link talks a little bit more about the Diacetyl Diabetes Program on the Centers of Disease Control, the milestones. If you want to go look it up, you can learn more about the program. And let me go back to my thing. Sorry about that. And also, the curriculum that it uses is also more about the program. It uses a framework. It's so many people involved, or organizations, employers, health professionals, universities. And the goals of the program, when they created the program, is to deliver this program throughout nationwide, to make sure it's quality and equity, to train community organizations, increase referrals, participations, all that cool stuff when you're starting a new program. So that was the main function of the program. So again, we have a lot of people with pre-diabetes, and that needs to change. Okay. All right, so my 2020 research. So when I started in 2020 on why there were no NDPPs, National Diabetes Prevention Programs in Kansas City, Missouri, well, after 2 years, I changed. And if you're on this capstone journey, you can feel my pain. You know you would change. You research stuff. Oh my gosh. So, okay, I researched some more, and so it went from that to why did organizations who had offered the program in person before COVID, they were doing it, decide, well, we don't want to offer no more. So they were offering it at one time. The YMCA in Kansas City, the University of Missouri Kansas Hospital. So it was a couple of organizations offering it. And then afterwards, they stopped. So after last year, I just was in my capstone and I interviewing process. I'm going to find out, why did they offer this program? This program is good. And so when I researched and why it's no longer being offered, it was like it's too long, the retention rate is low, especially in certain groups of color, where the retention rate is hard to keep. Some of them, no funding, it's hard to keep the funding in, no time to referral, lack of knowledge. I did not believe how many medical primary care doctors who, with 50% of Americans, especially in African American community, obese, and they don't know about these type of programs. No referrals process at all. Again, Amy mentioned what she saw in the schools that kind of disturbed her. One of the things that disturbed me in my journey is like, nobody really, oh yeah, they at risk for diabetes, but I don't know, I don't have time to refer, when I would ask some of the nurses or diabetes educated. Also, health insurance companies didn't really acknowledge the program because it's new, it's innovative. They didn't know about it. They know about management. They can give them when they get the type 2 diabetes, but they don't know about this prevention program. So we're going through hoops, trying to get the billing going on. It's too specific, and it needed to involve other chronic illnesses. So one of the things the YMCA in Kansas City pointed out was it's too specific. People have high blood pressure, they have heart disease. You just can't. And I've ran this program throughout the US with the Y of the USA in Philadelphia, Long Beach, and Atlanta. So in Philadelphia, and I noticed, that was a thing that, it was a big problem. And also, no umbrella. I'm under Missouri umbrella because we have participants in the program I'm doing now all over the US, but we're fortunate to be under an umbrella in Missouri that kind of covers and protects us. And that's the toolkit, I have it on there, but it's just basically, they partner with the state organization who is fully recognized, and they get smaller providers like myself and help us to get going and provide technical support and all those things. Also, so participants reported they didn't understand living healthy. Their doctor just said, oh, go exercise and lose weight, but they didn't know what to do. And participants said they needed guidance and they wanted to be told what to do. So again, St. Louis is doing really good in their National Diabetes Prevention Program, and they are doing very well. They're averaging about one cohort a month. And they also have a variety of chronic disease programs that are offering like high blood pressure management, and a whole lot of other things. Some other tools that sorry about that. Other research tools that I used to come to this conclusion was my nonprofit. Well, I'm actually doing the program myself. So one of the things I use is social media. And we have a little video real quick, and I'm going to show you in a minute, but we also received approval in last year while I'm in school. This is a research project. I got our nonprofit, we got approved to be a CDC site, offered a diabetes prevention program. I went back and got my coach certificate in being diabetes prevention program with my other 20 certifications. I had the opportunity to be under an umbrella with Have a New. We got $18,000 for funding. Actually, we just got another funding with Power Up, and we got another high blood pressure management funding. There's small little grants, but every little bit helps. And I haven't even really sat down and really started writing grants yet. So that's very promising. It was just me last year running this program. We now have a staff of 6 and 1 admin. We have a dietitian and we have 5 health coaches. And in 2023, we're going on our 4th cohort with about 55 active participants. So this is kind of what I use as my research tool as well. And so one of the things I proposed the revise is that they need to revise the MPP from what I found, and to get the retention rate. We're focusing on retention rate and reduce and prevent chronic illness, weight loss, and just helping people live a healthier lifestyle. And the programs, how we're doing is online, and it's offered throughout the US. And our 3rd cohort that we have now is one of the largest that we have so far. Some of the tools that we use for technology, I'll share with you real quick that are used. So when our coaches come into the program, they're able to see an app. This is one of the apps. We use 2 different apps. This is a healthy app. So one of the things I love when I did this thing in person, I did this program in person, it was nothing like this. I have journals of books like this, like stacks of journals. Now they do their journal electronically. And as the coaches, we are able to go and see. So I'm going to go ahead right now. This is the clients I was telling you about that I started with about 12 last year. So I'm going to put my Aunt Betty for HIPAA purposes. She doesn't mind. I always use her. So we're just going to kind of look at her a little bit. Here we go, Betty.
I'm so sorry, Terry. I'm going to actually have to stop you there because we're over time. Is it okay if we maybe drop it in the chat and we'll email it after? We actually do have one question. Do you mind answering that one quickly?
Sure.
Okay, so what are the risk factors for high rates of diabetes in Kansas and Missouri? And has the rates decreased without the chronic disease prevention?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the first question again?
What are the risk factors for high rates of diabetes in Kansas and Missouri?
Okay.
And then the second one was, has the rates decreased without the chronic disease prevention?
So the rates are risk factors are obesity, number 1, not being physically active. And that's why as a trainer, I'm so passionate, because I totally believe exercise is medicine. Like they said, if you could put exercise in a pill, it would be the most effective drug on the market. So so as far as in Missouri, we just got our first cohort in Missouri started. It was a bit of a challenge with the app we use for them, getting them started. So we have 5 Missourians, but from what I've seen, I have 2 people that's off their blood pressure meds. One is my mom and one is my aunt, as well as I do allow people with type 2 diabetes in the program. They have gone from a 16 A1C to a 13. And for Black women, this program works very well for them if they do it with family and friends. So yes, it works. Yes, thank you. But thank you for this honor. Thank you. I know I'm so passionate. I got long-winded. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Terry. We really enjoyed your presentation. We hope you have a wonderful day. So for our next presenter, we have Ms. Brianna. She is an APU MSW student, and this will be a video bio of her. Sorry, is everyone able to hear the sound?
No, I can't hear anything.
In the interest of time, I can introduce myself if that's okay. Okay, of course. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I wanted to say great job to all the other participants who presented. It was really interesting to hear all of that. But my name is Brianna Empsis. I'm an MSW student at Azusa Pacific University. And my research project, I really wanted to focus on barriers of women who are being released and ex-offenders. So I currently intern at a CCTRP, which stands for Custody to Community Transitional Reentry Program. And at my internship there, I really got to see barriers for these women. So once they reach a certain phase, they're eligible for job searching. But I found out early on that these participants, didn't get higher than an 8th grade education level and, weren't able to read or write oftentimes. And that was a barrier for job searching. So that's kind of where my research project came about. So I'm going to screen share now. So bear with me for a second. Okay. I hope you guys can see it, but this is my research poster. So like I mentioned, I do intern at a CCTRP. It's a voluntary program that allows eligible women with both serious and violent crimes to serve their sentence at our program in lieu of confinement at state prison. So it's an alternate to custody program, and it's 1 in 6 in all of California. So we provide a range of rehabilitative services that assist with drug and alcohol recovery, employment, education, housing, family reunification, and social support. So these are all important factors that help decrease recidivism, which is why that we're trying to target that upon re-entry into society for these individuals to decrease that recidivism. So eligible participants in our program have to stay a minimum of 45 days and a maximum of 32 months. So there's a range there. So we have a short-term and long-term program. So if they're there for anything less than 6 months or 6 months or less, then they're there for short-term, and 6 months or more, and they're there for long-term. So that's important to keep in mind as I'm presenting my research. As I'll mention in the sampling frame a little bit later. But our program is an incentivized program that our participants have to apply for while incarcerated, and then a board reviews their case upon their application and kind of agrees or disagrees, and then they get sent to our program. So it is an incentivized program. So for every 90 days they serve in our custody, they get 30 days off their sentence. So because of that, we do have a lot of participants applying for our programs, even if it's just for 45 days, which is the minimum stay, because they will get 15 days off for serving those 45 days. So the purpose of my research is to kind of focus on factors that may contribute to their experience within our program. So that's utilizing their services and really look at those underlying issues that may be barriers for these individuals, or even a lack of resources from our end for the community. So like I mentioned, it's kind of a need that I saw, which is where my research project came up with. It kind of was tricky getting it approved because, as we all know, incarcerated women are a vulnerable population. So that's why in the lit review, it's kind of generalized, but it was really interesting and difficult to get it approved, but I'm thankful we got it approved. And so in the lit review, I'm just going to quickly touch on the fact that, the number of incarcerated women is growing. The number of incarcerated individuals in general is also growing. So in between 1990 and 2017, incarcerated women in that population has grown over 750%. So that is a large number. And as we all know, incarceration is something that the United States heavily uses compared to other countries. So I'm looking at smart decarceration for this project. So Also, 1 in 3 individuals have education levels lower than a high school diploma. And that's even true for my caseload. A lot of my clients had an 8th grade level education or lower. And, that does affect their willingness to seek employment. That does affect their resume status, or so I thought. And, as we all know, obtaining and retaining employment is crucial in decreasing recidivism, because when they have stable employment, stable housing and things like that, then it decreases recidivism. And some other sources here talk about prison-based education, career training while incarceration is also a key part of successful reentry into society. And then prison education and post-release employment does reduce recidivism. So here, if you look over at my methodology, that first chart I have there highlights the different age groups that were a part of my research project. So I had 42 participants, and I did take a look at existing data. So I'm going to give you guys a little participant average so you guys know the population that I was working with. So the highest age group is 36 to 40-year-olds, and then following by that is 31 to 36-year-olds. So the mean age for participants is 39.5. The total average stay is 1 year and 9 months. It's 9 months, which is equivalent to 21 months. And a majority of participants did identify as Hispanic, and that comes in at 40%, with the next highest group African American, and the rest being identifying as white. And then they were mostly there for serious and violent charges. So all participants except 6, I want to say, were there for both serious and violent, and that is defined by the state of California. And that will come into play in a little bit when I talk about it. And they were mostly there for multiple charges as well. So over 70% were there serving multiple charges. And that was really interesting to see as well. And I did want to let you guys know that the chart on the right side goes over their employment status. So we had 24 individuals who were employed, with the rest being unemployed. So that's about 42% unemployed. And the highest type of employment that we had was warehouse employment, followed by customer service and food service after that. So this study design was designed as a program evaluation, and I used a quantitative study. I used existing data. As we all know, this is a vulnerable population, so I wasn't able to just go in and interview them and get this data straight from them. But I did use a daily register of participants, which includes their names, their CDCR numbers, their date of entry into our program, their expected date of parole, as well as their birthday. So I was able to get their age from there, and as well, which is their drug and alcohol abuse counselor. So if I needed any information, I would just talk to them about the specific participant. And then we also use phase up sheets, which include which phase the participant is in. So this is really important when I talked about short-term and long-term. So if participants are short-term, then they only get to make it up to phase 3. But that being said, they don't get to have employment or education. So it's important that they're there for long-term phase 3 or phase 4, because that means that they can get employment, can seek employment, and that they can have educational programs outside of our program as well. So that means that they can go out into society and do these things while still serving their time. So that's key, because I'll go over why in the sampling frame, or that's kind of why I selected those participants. And then I also used the vocational specialist documentation. So I kind of spoke with her, and she showed me her notes as to which participants are employed and where they're employed. And that's kind of where I got those categories of warehouse, customer service, food service, and things like that. And I did also need to speak to our Corrections 3 officer. So he's a CDCR officer, and he's the only one in our program that has access to their criminal charges or their tape scores and things like that. So I needed to speak to him, and he kind of gave me the necessary information without letting me see his documents. So that's why it's not on there. And then for my sampling frame, so my inclusion criteria is participants who are there for long term and reach the upper phases of the program. So that's phase 3 and phase 4. So phase 4 is for participants who are there for a long time, and they are successfully holding employment. So that's important as well. Those phase 3 and phase 4 allows them to job search and are currently in the program. And I also looked at recent graduates from our program that have met those same requirements. So I had a total of 42 participants. And for data analysis, I used SPSS and I ran independent t-test and a one-way ANOVA. So my first independent t-test, my variable was employment status. So I ran employment versus unemployment, and my dependent variables were TABE, ethnicity, age, current stay, total stay, and criminal charge. And the ones that came back significant, as you can see by the chart, are total stay and current time. And I'll go over those results in discussion. And then our second independent t-test that I ran was criminal charge. So the independent variables were serious crimes or serious and violent crimes. And I do present this portion of my data cautiously, as the groupings were not equal, so it may not be an accurate representation, but did to present. And so the dependent variables for this were TABE, ethnicity, age, current stay, total stay, and employment. As we can see, those did come back significant. So the people with only serious and violent charges were more in that TABE range of grade level equivalent. So that was interesting to see. But the participants with serious and violent had a lower level grade level attainment, and they were there for a longer total stay. But again, I do present that cautiously. And if you look over at my discussion over here, I'm just going to move you guys for a quick sec. One sec. Okay, there we go. So for my discussion here, you guys can see that findings suggest that ethnicity, TABE, age, and criminal charges don't affect their willingness to seek employment, nor the type of employment. So that was really interesting to me, because I really did expect, based on my interactions with these individuals, that, TABE or their criminal charge or age even may affect their willingness to seek employment. But that was not the case, and that was really interesting to see. And then findings did reveal that participants who remained in the program for 14 to 16 months did have higher rates of employment. So this is crucial because, like I mentioned earlier, they can stay for a minimum of 45 days and a maximum of 32 months. But my research showed that it really didn't matter if they were there for anything less than 14 months for employment. And it really also didn't matter if they were there anything longer than 16 months. So if they were there for less than 14 months or more than 16 months, it didn't affect their employment. But 14 to 16 months is that sweet spot, and it did have higher rates of employment. Now, I do want to talk and touch upon my limitations. So my limitations include that this is a small sample size, and it's a small sample size due to a couple of reasons. The first being the residual effects of COVID-19. So due to COVID-19, our program did have to close and be on lockdown like many other places. So our participants were not able to go out and work, and they were not able to job search. So I think that it was unfair to kind of count them in if they were there for that time, because then it would just be skewed and unfair to the results as well. And another reason for the small limitation size is the other CCTRPs in California withdrew their willingness to participate. So I proposed this idea to them through our corrections officer. They all agreed, which got me really excited and happy. But upon realizing what they had to do, when I reached out to them and let them know what I needed from them, they withdrew due to the time consumingness of the project. And also, another limitation that I think it's important to touch upon is the TABE exams may not exactly represent their literacy level. So similar to an SAT is not comprehensive of someone's literacy levels or even how smart they are and things like that. So I think it's important to take that same lens when we're looking at TABE exams. And again, that stands for Test of Adult Basic Education. And another thing that I think it's important to consider while looking at TABE exams and their scores, sorry about that, is that they're required to take this exam while incarcerated. So that's if they're at CIW or any other prisons, they take this exam in the prison that they're currently being held in the cafeteria. So in many times, our participants are experiencing fight or flight while they're incarcerated. So it's not necessarily fair to their scores if they're experiencing fight or flight mode, because we all know that we are not the best test takers when we're experiencing that. So I think that's important to also keep in mind. And in terms of further research, I think I would continue this research with a larger sample size and encourage my agency to do so. I would also like to follow up with these individuals to see the long-term effects of factors of employment and recidivism. And in terms of sustainability, I really do think my agency can utilize this data to start understanding how the length of stay may affect participants, and really encourage my agency to continue analyzing this data and reach out to CDCR, which stands for California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, and with the existing data and also new data, and suggest a decrease in maximum stay if they agree. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so informative and really great to hear. We do have a question from one of our attendees. It says the jobs you mentioned related to this program sound like low-wage jobs that would place them at the poverty limits for income. And this could, he said, it might be an assumption. Do you have an idea of how this could be overcome in the future from an agency's perspective? Rates of employment increasing are great, but they are only finding jobs that are placing them at the poverty threshold relating to the jobs they obtain after leaving the agency.
Yeah, I do think that's a really big factor in it as well. But with our agency, we partner with Homeboy Industries and ARC and other things like that to get them jobs where they want to go. So we have a construction company that comes into our program and kind of educates the participants who are interested in that on how to do that. We also have educational programs that they are willing or that are voluntary that they can sign up for to get vocation. But this seems to be what our participants want to do. And these are women, in my experience, at least on my caseload, that have never had a job in their entire life before. So we don't want to discourage them from working, even if it is a low wage job. But we do have opportunities for career building, but oftentimes they don't seem interested in that, which is also something to look into.
Thank you.
Of course, I'm also going to put my email and LinkedIn in the chat. If anyone's interested in asking any other questions, I'm just an email away. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. And then we're also going to include that information just put in the chat in the post email. Hope you have a great day. Thank you. And then also something else, Brianna, there was a mention in the chat. Thank you so much, that it was very informative. So for our final presenter, we do know that it is 2:32. We ask to please bear with us for about 15 more minutes as we have our last presenter. So I would first like to introduce her, and then it will be a 10-minute video presentation on her topic. So Emily is a clinical social worker and the co-founder of Reclaim Divergence, a mental health practice that staffs neurodivergent practitioners to work with neurodivergent clients with an emphasis on the intersection of neurodivergent and LGBTQIA, P2S plus queer identities. Her work is focused on the strengths of identity-based care in mental health to improve health outcomes for the significant intersection of neurodivergent and queer patients. Through her work, she is seeking to end disparities in mental health care for this group, while also addressing the pervasive underdeployment of neurodivergent and queer practitioners. Emily is currently working with a development team to create a national training certification for practitioners to learn how to better serve their neurodivergent patients and colleagues through this intersectional lens.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. I am recording this video to share more with you about my work and research regarding closing the health gap for neurodivergent individuals in the mental health care system. For those who don't know, neurodivergence is an umbrella term that's used to describe the natural differences or variances in human biodiversity. These differences are often referred to through titles like autism, ADHD, Tourette syndrome, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and many other names. 1 in 7 adults is currently estimated to be neurodivergent in some way, although many studies are showing that this number is likely much higher. This is due to the pervasive misdiagnosis and underdiagnosis of certain groups. For example, studies have shown that autistic girls are often misdiagnosed in childhood as having social anxiety disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. Other studies have shown that Black or brown children are diagnosed with behavioral disorders like oppositional defiant disorder before ever being given a chance to go through a screening for autism or ADHD or other neurodivergent conditions. These are just some examples of the pervasive issue with underdiagnosis and misdiagnosis in childhood. This indicates that there's likely a higher prevalence of neurodivergence than what the current models estimate. Individuals without neurodivergent conditions are referred to as neurotypical. Neurotypical references the majority group in society. Neurotypical is the group that sets the standards and enforces the standards for acceptable human behavior. Because neurodivergent individuals struggle to adapt to these standards for social behavior that are set by the majority, they receive disparate access in society. They receive mistreatment. They have higher early mortality rates. They have higher levels of unemployment and underemployment, and they have a significantly higher risk of completed suicides. About 35 years ago, the neurodiversity affirming movement began. And this movement states that these pathologized conditions, these labels, are perfectly normal variations in human neurology, and that they should be affirmed and accommodated for instead of pathologized and othered. Essentially, what they're saying is that neurodivergent people should be allowed to be who they are and how they are without requiring significant treatment to force them to behave the way that the majority expects. There's also a very important intersection to consider when we think about addressing the disparities that are faced by this population. While many studies show that around 8% of the general population identifies as queer in some way, over 54% of neurodivergent individuals do. This significant overlap requires an intersectional understanding to address the many unique needs of this population. Many people within this intersection report facing extra discrimination from mental health care providers and from systems who are supposed to help them. They report being misunderstood by their providers, misgendered. They report being pathologized for their behavior that doesn't match social norms, right? Things like eye contact or stimming. Additionally, they struggle to find attentive and affirming care. They often have to spend their own emotional energy desperately trying to teach their providers about their own identities so that they can be understood. They face further barriers with unemployment and underemployment, and this financial instability impacts their overall ability to seek care. A part of this population that I want to make sure to address in this introduction that's often forgotten is the current neurodivergent mental health care practitioner. They're not present in the narrative, but they are available, they're not rare, and they're able to serve these clients. Neurodivergent practitioners, therapists, psychologists, counselors, social workers, psychiatric nurse practitioners, they face the same disparities that neurodivergent clients do. These neurodivergent practitioners are more likely to be unemployed or underemployed, and they're more likely than neurotypical providers to face disparate access in every area of life. By empowering neurodivergent practitioners to treat neurodivergent clients in mental health care, mental health outcomes can improve for the clients, and the overall stability of the practitioners can be addressed and better supported. Through an extensive qualitative review of available literature, it became evident that identity-based care has been effective for other populations. For example, medical patients who have a doctor who shares their same race or their same gender are statistically proven to have better health outcomes. There is, however, a significant lack of literature regarding the unique needs of the neurodivergent and queer intersection in mental health, both for patients and providers who share these identities. To gather more direct data, I've worked with a colleague to open a mental health practice that currently staffs 11 practitioners who hold these neurodivergent and queer identities. Most of the practitioners are autistic, some have ADHD, and almost all are also queer in some way. In the practice, there are 7 therapists, a psychologist, 2 nurse practitioners, a medical doctor, and a clinical director. The practice offers outpatient therapy, group therapy, medication management, as well as diagnostic testing for teens and adults who might be autistic or have ADHD, along with the treatment of other mental health concerns. Additionally, the practice offers supportive training to autistic therapists all over the country who seek to learn how to assess for autism in adults who may have had a missed childhood diagnosis. To date, the practice has served 456 clients and trained 22 therapists, most of which also hold these identities. To collect data about efficacy, clients are surveyed every quarter to determine their experiences receiving identity-based care. and their self-reported comparisons regarding the care that they may have received previously from clinicians who did not share their identities. This is all very new. The practice was launched in 2021, and the surveys began in mid-2022. To date, there have only been 3 rounds of surveys, but so far in the 3 rounds, the evidence is clear that the individuals served by the practice consistently self-report improved mental health outcomes. The metrics used in the data are time in treatment, decreased suicidality, the client's perception of how much emotional labor they must spend to teach their practitioner about their identity, as well as progress towards established measurable treatment goals made by the client and their provider at the beginning of treatment. Another metric that we're looking at is the longevity of practitioner employment in the practice. Most of the practitioners in the practice are neurodivergent and have been unemployed in the past. Because neurodivergent people are at this very high risk of being unemployed or underemployed, many of our practitioners have struggled to maintain this. One of our long-term metrics is identifying the ways in which the environment of this practice contributes to the longevity of practitioners remaining employed throughout the practice. Now, this data set is still yet to be collected. The practice is still new. We are just about 2 years into the development of this, but the practitioner metric is also an important step. So looking ahead, there's much more data that needs to be collected to effectively analyze the impact of identity-based care in addressing the needs of both practitioners and patients who are part of these groups. The next step of the project is development. In this development is a comprehensive training program that will teach practitioners all across the United States how to provide neurodivergent affirming care through an intersectional lens. The training also has a second focus, and this is teaching mental health care organizations how to be safe and affirming for their neurodivergent and queer practitioners. The project is being led by a multidisciplinary neurodiverse team. Neurodiverse means that both neurodivergent and neurotypical practitioners are collaborating together to establish a training curriculum. Data will be tracked through a series of pre- and post-test surveys that will be compared, as well as follow-up surveys 6 months and 1 year after the training is complete. Significantly later phases of this project also include the development of a peer certification program that will train neurodivergent and queer individuals who are not medical professionals to support their peers in an affirming and beneficial way. The goal of this is to create more employment opportunities and to focus on the idea of identity-based support and peer support to improve mental health outcomes for this population. By training more practitioners and empowering more neurodivergent and queer practitioners to be able to work in these environments that are safe and accepting of them, we can change the way that mental health care is provided and utilized throughout the country in a meaningful way. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate being able to share my work with you so far.
And if anyone has any questions regarding Emily's topic, I have dropped her email address in the chat. And she says you're more than welcome to email her for any questions. And this concludes our event. Thank you all for attending our 2023 Research Symposium. A big thank you to all of our presenters who took the time out of their day to come educate as well as participate in our symposium. A special shout out to our faculty advisor, Professor Sue Chen, who has been instrumental in helping to organize this symposium. And again, thank you for all of you for attending. We're so grateful that you stayed with us from the beginning all the way to the end and participating in our symposium. We also do have a post-evaluation that we would like for everyone to fill out, just so we know what we can improve on for next time, as well as what went well. We will go ahead, we drop the link on the chat, and we also have a QR code. And I just want to end with saying that March is Social Work Month, and the theme is Social Work Breaks Barriers. And we hope you have a great day. Thank you. And thank you, Jay, for your comment. We are so grateful for you to attend. We hope it was helpful, the information.